Hello, today on my channel you will hear an amazing story about life. I hope you enjoy this story. This one struck me to the core. Honestly, I still can't forget it. Enjoy watching.
Michelle was finally free. The prison gates closed behind her. Jessie was free, young, and could feel happy. Jessie stood at a loss and didn't know where to go now. No one had met her. She had no relatives as she had grown up in an orphanage. Her parents may have been alive. But what could Jessie, taken from this family at the age of 3, know about them? She never remembered them. Only occasionally, only in nightmares, did she see that red room in the corner of which she lived like an animal, eating disgusting food after the drunken binges of those who were her mother and father. But whether they were her real parents, she had always doubted. And not just because those men had never been interested in her, but because she remembered how her mother used to say to the social workers with relief, "Take the girl. I'll finally get rid of this brat. They haven't paid money for her for a long time anyway. They abandoned her and forgot about her. Who abandoned her? Why forgotten, and who was supposed to pay the money?" This she did not know and suspected she never would. But then she lived in an orphanage where it wasn't easy either. Better than that first home, of course. At least they fed. There were clean beds without bed bugs and cockroaches, and there was a chance to go outside. But it wasn't the best orphanage, not like the ones on TV. I guess it was ordinary, though. TV shows you what you need. It wasn't hungry, but it wasn't nourishing either. It just wasn't good. Boring. Jessie didn't even make any friends at the orphanage. What kind of friends? She wasn't interested in socializing because she was unsociable and couldn't get along with the other kids. She wasn't liked by the kids or the teachers. There's a princess walking around. Everything is wrong with her. Taken from an ordinary drunken family. If she had lived with them, they would have drunk her long ago. But here they feed her, clothe her, and instead of saying thank you, she wrinkles her nose, they said. Jessie knew very well she wasn't from the palace. She remembered her relatives, though vaguely, but she did not think she was in paradise. She didn't feel grateful to the state for taking care of her. But since some time she learned that behind the walls of the orphanage there is a big world, where a completely different, happy life, but from the orphanage to the big world, was not let out. A few times they took me to the Christmas tree, to some performances. But what can you see through the bus window? The first time Jessie ran away was when she was 7. But where does a little girl like that, who didn't know which way to go? She was caught and returned. But she breathed the air of freedom and loved it forever. And now, almost 20 years later, she was in the same happy, overwhelming state of freedom, and would never ever again be in an institution where she was forced to get up and lie down on command, where she had to eat by the hour what she was given, where at any moment she could expect a shout, a push, or a blow. It was exactly the same feeling she had had then, almost 20 years ago, when she had felt free, and just as she had then, she had gone wherever her eyes took her. Just because she wanted to and because she could. And now she can't be caught, and she won't be caught. She's out legally, and no one else has to, or will show her their unwanted concern for her. But where to go and how to use that freedom, she had no idea. Jessie ran away from the orphanage regularly, even though she knew that eventually she would be caught. But at least for a short time she could be away from these damned walls, for these few hours. And then days she was ready to pay for weeks in the isolation center. Deprivation of some orphanage benefits, however, very dubious, to endure the scolding, reproaches, and forecasts of educators. You want to be free again? You'll make it to adulthood, you won't live to see adulthood, you'll end up in prison. Is that what you want? You want to escape from there, they will teach you to love freedom. It was a shame to hear such a thing. Why would she go to prison? She wasn't going to do anything wrong. On the contrary, she was sure that her adult life would be honest and beautiful. What kind of life she was going to have was suggested by being free. Growing up in a state institution, she always wanted something tasty. Not the orphanage sticky porridge, not liquid soup, but fried potatoes with onion rings, not gray cutlets, but something unusual and delicious. And such things were only at liberty. But it cost money, which of course Jessie didn't have and couldn't have. So she could only inhale incredibly seductive aromas of unknown dishes, which sometimes came from some doors, above which was written cafe or restaurant. At first, the girl did not even come close to such establishments. She was afraid not to go inside. She quickly passed by, inhaling the aromas of dishes, the composition, taste, and even appearance of which she could not imagine. She didn't dare to enter any of these establishments either. She knew they wouldn't let her in. When she was a little girl, she had tried, but they wouldn't let her in. Go away, girl. No kids allowed in here. And she wasn't cheeky, and she didn't know how to ask. So she stood around sometimes, breathing in the aromas. One day, she had an amazing stroke of luck. She was hanging around a summer cafe where tables were set up outside. People were eating their wonderful meals, chatting, laughing. Heard suddenly some aunt, apparently tipsy and therefore kind. Her little girl, you must be hungry. And she handed her a chebrek wrapped in oil paper. It's a miracle. Not a pie, but something hot inside in the thin, crispy dough. Wonderfully flavorful juice and meatball that tasted vintage. And a big one it was. It disappeared in my hungry stomach in seconds. You could eat 1,000,000 of them. And if someone gave them to me. But that was the only one, and it was over quickly. But the hands on which the drops of juice and fat fell smelled of this deliciousness for a long time. Well, she was chased away from those summer cafes too, and there were no more kind people. It was better near simple summer cafes, where people did not sit, but ate standing up. They drank, of course, and were kind. They took pity on the little girl, looking at her hungry eyes, and shared various tasty things, and they caught more people there. The cops would hang around, catch her, and send her back to the orphanage. There again, they took her away, deprived her, scolded her, sent her to other orphanages, and threatened to send her to a colony as soon as possible. An infestation rare, wandering around in the middle of nowhere. Something will happen to her, will be responsible, and it will happen to her. She hangs around the pubs. But where's that been seen? She'll ask the drunken men. Oh, she'll ask for it. And the main thing is that she teaches other girls bad things. After all, tells them about all sorts of chebreks and kebabs, and they do not give them for free. Pay with what? But with the same and a couple more years, and the case is ready. She herself will go by the hand and will pave the way for others. I'm sorry. She should be put behind a high fence and kept there until she comes of age. And how will she grow up? Let her be responsible for herself. Such talk frightened her, and even more touched her remark of one of the educators, who, learning about the true adventures, strictly and seriously said, the main thing, Jessie, self-esteem. It doesn't matter who you are, who your parents are, how you live now. It's important to respect yourself and remember that you're a girl. And know that if you beg at some diner, you'll be a beggar forever. You're still young, but your future is already being set. You can't eat scraps and humiliate yourself. If you want to be a respectable person, start being one now. Jessie wasn't going to beg, though. Just looking, apparently, at people and their food. So they didn't share anything. It happened that even from the tables of street cafes, she slowly picked up something uneaten. But since Rozesa Semyonovna said it was wrong, she wouldn't do it. She doesn't want to be a maid all her life. She'll work by herself in a nice restaurant, the one on one of the main streets of the city. Yes, Jessie chose this place as her future job when she was 10 years old and thought she would make it. In the meantime, she could only sit in the distance and watch beautiful, dressed-up people approach the restaurants and watch them walk out of there. Through the large windows, she could see them sitting at tables or celebrating in large groups, or sitting in pairs or alone. Jessie imagined herself sitting inside like that. It was nice, but she wanted to work there too. At first, she thought she was ready for even the most insignificant position, washing tables and dishes. Then she remembered her teacher's words about dreaming bigger. And she decided that she would own a restaurant. She had no idea how to achieve it, but she could dream, right? No, as she got older, she realized, dreaming is fine, of course, but you have to look at the world more realistically. No one would hire her as a waitress without special education. First, it is necessary to finish school at least somehow, to graduate from the orphanage, and then we will see. But everything went wrong. Jessie finished high school with difficulty. She showed no interest in learning. And the urge to run away from the orphanage didn't go away either. She couldn't stay still. However, she gave up this idea, realizing that it is fraught. After school, she went where they directed, in the sewing school, which wanted the least. But she realized that she had to obey her elders, otherwise she could get nowhere. And she was supposed to be given a place to live. They didn't deceive her. But not a new apartment, but already some kind of settled, small, dark, not the best, but her own. That's good. She could live and think about another job because she didn't want to sew at all, but she had to. And not in a factory or a workshop, but in a colony. She got there through no fault of her own. She was just hanging out with a random group of people. But then it turned out there'd been a theft, but she was nearby. There didn't seem to be much evidence against her. But the girl was from an orphanage with a bad record, to put it mildly. They gave her 2 years for nothing, and her teachers and nannies were right, who taught her to love freedom. A colony is not an orphanage. But she was 18 now, not 8. Jessie realized that childhood was over. No one would discount the fact that she was orphaned and small. Those damn 2 years had been hard, but at least she could sew, which helped. There was nowhere to go back to. She was all alone. No one would send her a parcel, letters of support like other prisoners. So it wasn't easy. But she got through it. She's out and about. She doesn't know where she's going. But what does it matter if she can go wherever she wants, and no one asks her where and why? But no one can tell her what to do next. It's a good thing they kept the apartment. Thanks to the lawyer, he told her how to write a statement. He was useless. But it is necessary to live not only somewhere but also on something. Jessie did not even remember about her childhood dream. In what restaurant or even in the most rundown beer hall will not hire a person with a criminal record? And they didn't want to take her to sewing shops either. But at first she didn't worry. The euphoria of free life did not let her put her hands down. And then one day, by chance, she got the luck she never dreamed of. Jessie was walking through the park, and a young mother with a stroller was walking towards her. Jessie saw it and envied it. How lucky people are. She loved children, strangely enough. She herself did not know why, and why she had such an attitude to babies because she had none of her own. And in the orphanage, groups of small children were in another building, so it was rarely possible to socialize with them. But she could not pass by babies in strollers. Sure to look in, and at the sight of this baby becomes warmer on the soul, and here are 3 at once. And the mother, a young, beautiful, well-groomed woman, does not look happy at all, more like annoyed, and handles the stroller somehow ineptly. The wheel is stuck in some pothole. Instead of steering it carefully, the young mother jerked it. The kids woke up, freaked out, cried, and instead of pitying and calming them down, she angrily barked, "Will you shut up or not?" "Let me help you." Jessie came running over, helped free the stroller, and leaned over to the babies. "Well, who's crying here? It's all good now. You'll go on walking now." "Oh, not children, but a punishment," complained the mother. They yell and yell one by one, then in unison. There's no storage. "Why? They're so nice, all boys." "Oh, you're lucky to have 3 at once. You don't often get such luck." "Oh, my enemies would be so lucky," said the woman angrily. "And you, I see, know how to handle children. And such a young woman, do you have a pedagogical education?" She noticed that as soon as Jessie spoke to them, the kids calmed down, started smiling and reaching out to her with their hands. Jessie replied, "No education. I just love children. I would love to take care of them. I look at them and my heart is happy." "Do you work anywhere?" asked the stranger. "No, not working yet, just entertaining the children," replied Jessie. "Do you know if you'd like to take me in as your nanny?" Unexpectedly, the young mother suggested. "My husband and I will pay well, and you can live with us. A college education doesn't matter to me, to be honest. I can see you have a talent for dealing with children. No one can calm them down that quickly. I thought it was going to be another hour-long concert, and you figured out how to calm them down in a minute?" Jessie liked the suggestion, but she was in a bit of shock, realizing that after the young mother learned the truth about her, she would run away with the babies, and would also berate her for meddling with her children. And she, no matter how offended she was to refuse such an offer, had to say, "But you see, I was recently released from prison, where I spent 2 years. Where am I going to get you to see me like this?" Jessie's eyes even brimmed with tears. Either her mother felt sorry for her, or she wanted to take care of her children. But she said, "Oh, I don't care about your imprisonment. It's not for murder. Everything else is nothing. The main thing is that the children are looked after. Otherwise, I'll go crazy until they're at least a little older. Really, I'm all taken up in 6 months. My husband didn't want a nanny at first. The kids were too young. The nurse helped, but now I can't find one. You know, there aren't many people willing to do it for 3. Well, do you agree? Apparently, she had already decided everything for herself. She switched to you and completely handed over control of the stroller to Jessie. "Let's go straight to our place. I'll show you the house and we'll get started right away. and in the evening my husband will come. You'll get to know each other." Jesse gladly agreed. "Only your husband probably won't approve. He might be a more sensible man and realize that it's not a good idea to invite the first man he meets to look after his children. And when he finds out everything about me, he'll kick me out." The family appeared to be very wealthy. The landlady's name was Emily. She lived with the children and her husband in a huge house where the children had a large room, but only one for the three of them. "Well, we don't have to run to each one in a separate one," Emily chattered as she showed Jesse the house. "I hope you'll stay on my team until school. I'm exhausted. But I never thought I'd have so many children and in such a brutal way," urged Jake, my husband. "I didn't really want kids, but he's the one who wants them." "And what does he do for you?" Jesse asked, realizing that such a rich house couldn't belong to a simple man. "He has his own restaurant downtown called Aristocrat's Picnic. Have you heard of it?" "Yes, I've seen it, of course. But I haven't been inside," Jesse replied, confused. It was, after all, the very establishment she'd dreamed of working at, the one she'd spent so much time near as a child. "It was called something else back then. But you'll work for us. Maybe you can talk to Jake when he comes in. We'll agree on a salary. He's a man who's not pushy." "Yeah, I think he'll kick me out," Jesse shared her concerns. "I'll kick him out. He'll be out himself. My word is the most important thing in this house, so don't be afraid." Soon the owner arrived. He looked tired, but he wanted to see the children. "How was your day?" he asked his wife. "Jake, fine. And it's all thanks to her, Jesse. You don't know how she handles them. When she looks at them, they're all smiles on their faces, happy, contented, happy, and they didn't cry once. They ate without any whimsy, and she put them to sleep quietly, too." Very pleased, the young, handsome owner looked at Jesse affably and said she could just call him by his first name. I mean, she's practically family. Jesse was really getting very tired. Still, 3 kids. She showed Michael the paperwork, told him all about herself. Michael was silent, didn't say anything. But then Jesse heard Amelia saying indignantly to him, "Yes, please, throw her out only, and the children then, either yourself or give them somewhere. There are some nurseries. Or did you think I'd let you? You always mock me." When the landlady came out after this conversation, Jesse was ready to pack her things so as not to serve as a cause of discord. But Amelia shouted at her, "It's all right, you stay. I told you, you can't argue with me." And so Jesse became Travis and Logan's nanny, and soon an actual member of the family. Not an equal member, but still a member of the family. Jesse liked the kids at first sight, and she grew more attached to them every day. Her biggest fear now was losing this place. It wasn't that she was afraid of losing her paycheck, which was quite substantial, by the way. She was afraid to imagine being separated from her children. It turned out that the owners were afraid of the same thing. "But you're still a very young girl, Jesse. You'll want a marriage, children of your own. I can't even imagine what will happen to our boys without you," the landlord once said. "Oh, knock on wood," Amelia immediately jumped in. "She's only 20 years old. We've got 10 years, if not more, to spare. Let her stay with us for now, and then let her marry wherever she wants to go." "I don't think about that yet," Jesse smiled. "And I can't imagine loving anyone more than your boys." "Yeah, and not without you," Amelia agreed. "You went shopping the other day. There was such a shouting match. I almost went deaf. You don't linger anywhere. You taught yourself to do it, and now you're doing it yourself." It's good that she and Jesse have such a rapport. But still, Amelia, you should pay more attention to your children. You're their mom, Michael reminded her. "I don't forget that, but I haven't seen the light of day in 6 months. I have my whole life to live," Amelia replied. And she indeed, having realized that she could shift most of the maternal duties to the nanny, began to live, that is, to lead the very life of a wealthy lady, which apparently led before the birth of the children. Amelia woke up late when her husband had already gone to work and the children were raised, fed and dressed. Then she would spend a long time getting ready, tidying herself up in the bathroom, then in her room in front of the dressing table, making herself beautiful. And only then would she look in on the babies, saying indifferently, cheerfully, "Hello, offspring," and to Jesse, "I'm going to run errands. I need to go shopping or to the salon. It's time to get cleaned up." Carelessly tossing, "Kids, behave yourselves, obey Amber," she'd leave, sometimes for the whole day. Once in a while, she stayed home and kept Jesse company to walk down the street with her and the kids. But she paid no particular attention to them, nor did they to her. Indeed, there was no connection between this mother and the children. That surprised Jessie, who sincerely loved the kids and did not understand how she could be so indifferent to them. But at the same time, she herself was quite satisfied with this state of affairs. She loved the babies very much and was proud of their affection. She saw that the father loved his boys. No matter how tired he came home from work, he always found time to be with them, to play with them, to talk to them. But with his wife, it seems, his relationship did not add up, mainly because of the same thing, because of her inattention to the children, unwillingness to give time to them, and household chores. In addition to the nanny, they had a housekeeper who did the cleaning, sometimes cooked something, went to the store for groceries. But even with so many attendants, Emilia did not miss the opportunity to roll her husband a scandal on the theme that he dumped everything on her 3 children. And in general, you all. And I, by the way, I was not born to do everything here as a housekeeper. Don't you realize that it's very difficult? I'm already exhausted. I understand perfectly well, Michael replied. What I don't realize is that it's harder for you than it is for me. You're never even home. I don't know where you hang out all day. Oh, is that so? I hang around. You'll soon accuse me of having lovers. Jessie never accused you of that, but she wouldn't be surprised to hear that something like that might be going on. But what kind of mother with 3 kids spends her whole days out of the house? After that, particularly bitter arguments and quarrels broke out. At first, Jessie felt sorry for the landlord who had such a bad relationship with his wife. Then she began to feel sympathy for him and noticed that he also clearly cared for her. At first, she took it as gratitude for being so good to his children, but then she realized that Michael cared for her as a woman. It didn't make her happy, it frightened her. Jessie was well aware of who she was in this house. Even taking into account that her husband's relationship with his wife left a lot to be desired, what business was it of hers? Michael had married Emily, which meant he had loved her at least once. And if things aren't going well between them now, they could change at any moment. And the fact that she liked Michael herself was irrelevant, just as she had no right to meddle in anyone's personal life. She began to try to communicate less with the father of her charges, but it was unrealistic. Michael constantly asked how the kids behaved, what changes had occurred in their behavior, what they did during the day, how they felt. And at the same time, he was talking to her. Aren't you bored with them all day long? Surely you want to take a break from this kind of work sometimes. I don't get tired, Jessie answered. She tried to keep her voice as neutral as possible. I enjoy being with them, and I'm perfectly able to rest when they're asleep. Oh, and Emilia spends time with them during the day too. And that was already a blatant lie. But Jessie felt it was her duty to remind him that Michael had a wife and the children had a mother, and she was just a hired nanny, something she never forgot. He realized that the nanny was telling the truth, but he didn't argue, instead trying to communicate with her more often. You know I own my own restaurant, Jessie, and I thought you said you'd seen it, but you never went in. Wouldn't you like to visit it? Maybe I have, she answered. I used to some time ago, but not so much now. I'm busy with the children after. I'm much more interested with them than in some restaurant. In this case, she spoke quite sincerely, dreaming about the restaurant, about working in it, and about the possibility of tasting something extraordinary, delicious, had long ago been relegated to the background. She was not going to admit that visiting this establishment had been her childhood dream. She was embarrassed about it, and she was even more embarrassed about Michael's attitude toward her, because she felt that he cared for her and might be interested in getting closer to her. Even the very possibility of such a thing seemed to her as horrible as vulgarity. A nanny having an affair with the master, and if the mistress found out, not only would she lose her place, but she'd never see the children again. No, there's no way that could happen, she thought. Now Jessie dreamed of her home, of her children, and her family, although she realized that it was a pipe dream and not at all because she didn't have the opportunity to marry. Perhaps if she had gone somewhere, she would have gotten some fiancé, but she didn't want to go anywhere. And certainly not to meet anyone, because she could no longer hide from herself that she loved one man, Michael, and the children. She loved these 3 children, who were born not to Emilia but to someone else, and even though they are other children, apparently they do not need them at all. But anyway, Emilia was Michael's mother and wife, and Jessie was just a babysitter. And sometimes she cried bitterly at night, realizing the hopelessness of her situation. Perhaps the right thing to do would be to leave this house now, to go away and forget Michael and her foolish feeling forever. But still, that meant leaving the children. There was no way Jessie was willing to do that. She loved them and she couldn't part with them. Most importantly, she couldn't leave the babies because she knew there was no mother for them. Jessie was clearly puzzled by Amelia's attitude toward the children. She wondered how the new nanny would treat the babies. It was unlikely that anyone could love them the way she did. With these thoughts, Jessie hugged the children and then scolded herself. Of course, Amelia loved them, just in her own way, not knowing how to express her feelings. But she was their mother, so she would learn. Michael was becoming more and more sympathetic to Jessie, and she was finding it harder and harder to resist because she had feelings for him too. But how to fight those feelings? Jessie didn't know, and then she realized she didn't want to fight them either. After all, why couldn't one love a person? One could keep one's feelings secret. However, hiding them from Michael proved difficult. He fell in love with Jessie and saw that she was not indifferent to him. Soon his courtship became more frank. One day Michael bluntly said, "Jessie, you see how I feel about you, and I see how you feel about me. We love each other. Why are you pushing me away?" "Don't you understand?" Jessie exclaimed. "I work as a nanny in your house with your children, and you want me to be your mistress? Isn't it enough to have a woman you love? Or would you have a harem? You have a wife." It was evident that the conversation was agonizing for Michael as well. "Yes, but look at the relationship I have with my wife. She's had 3 kids and Hey, Jessie, you don't know the main thing. She didn't give birth to them. We got these babies from an orphanage. Their mother's dead, no relatives, and I've always dreamed of having a big family." Amelia, on the other hand, didn't want kids, but she didn't want to get divorced. It's all about money, you know. So I decided to adopt orphans. She was against it, but she agreed to it to avoid divorce. And now she doesn't want a divorce, even though I'm ready to file for divorce tomorrow. But legally, she is their mother. "Please stop your harassment," Jessie tried to explain, but realized she couldn't hide her feelings. "I grew up in such an environment that anything could have happened to me. And it did. But since I was a little girl, I knew it was all about respecting myself. How will I respect myself if I become the mistress of the man I work for?" Herself is eager to convince herself. Eventually, they became lovers. Jessie realized the duality of her position, but she was happy. She had a lover. He loved her. They lived together. Yes, formally he was married to another, but Michael said that he would divorce Amelia, marry Jessie, and then she would officially become a mother of boys, which she dreamed of. But the happiness was short-lived. One day Amelia came home at the wrong time and realized her husband's relationship with Jessie. A huge scandal broke out. "You've got a snake on your chest." "Wait it," he screamed, Amelia. She herself brought this scum into the house. She stole my children. She wants to steal my husband." "Stop it. You know that's not true." Michael tried to calm his wife. "How did you betray me? Killed me? Do you understand?" Amelia rushed into the nursery where the children, hearing the screams, were crying loudly. She grabbed them in her arms and ran around the house screaming hysterically, telling the 1-year-olds how horribly their mother had been insulted. A terrified Jake, Logan, and Travis reached for Jessie. She, with trembling hands, was packing up her things. Her fairy tale was over as it should have been. She was shamefully banished, having lost everything. "Amelia, stop it, please," Michael said. "You're scaring the children." He was thrashing between the 2 women. "Jessie, don't go because the children..." "That's right, the children shouldn't be living in a house with a woman like that. Get out of here right now," Amelia shouted. "But you realize that's not possible right now," Michael tried to calm her down. "Jessie, wait, don't leave. At least for the sake of the children," Michael begged. "I'm not staying here for a minute." "Yes, for the sake of the children. Emily's right. They shouldn't have to live in this environment." "Come on," Jessie said tearfully. "You see, even these creatures who've been in prison understand perfectly well that it can't be like this. What about you? Let her get out immediately." "I do not want to see them in my house," shouted the hostess, trying to drown out the child's crying on the... As she said goodbye, Jessie glanced only at the children. She hurriedly picked up the things in her bag and went out. Michael was about to rush after her, but his wife stopped. "Well, dear," she said in a calm voice, "let's stop all this immediately. You forget your mistress and the whole story. We live as a normal couple, or else I'll leave home with the kids right now. It doesn't matter where, and you know where. But everyone will know you're having an affair with your own kid's nanny. That would be a big disadvantage to your reputation. Now, that was a serious consideration for Michael. He was about to sign a very important contract, and the news that he had an affair with a nanny, which caused his wife and 3 babies to run away from home, would jeopardize not only his reputation, but also the entire existence of the restaurant, which was his brainchild and breadwinner. Certainly the children were important to him, and Jessie herself was important to him. But if he lost the business, he would lose the children. After all, Emilia was officially their mother and had every right to take them and leave. Or not even leave, but sue him for everything. He'd be left with nothing, and most importantly, without the kids, who would certainly have a hard time with a mom like that. He couldn't risk everything, not even for Jessie, whom he truly loved. So he had to accept the separation, although he tried to call and explain she was no longer picking up the phone, and that was quite expected and very much in her spirit. The girl was too proud. Michael knew that and realized that he was very guilty in front of her, but there was nothing he could do about it at this point. Jessie, having left the house where her heart remained, almost fell right on the street. Michelle was horrified by what had happened. Everything was gone. She was separated from her children, separated from the man she loved. Now her life would never be the same. She was what she remained, a criminal, and she would be like that all her life, not noticing that there was cold rain outside, which streamed down her face and body. She walked without seeing the road, reached her empty, abandoned apartment, lay down on the bed and lay like that for a long time, not realizing what she should do next. That is, she didn't think about any future. She didn't have one. And the past was terrible. It wasn't until a few days later that Jessie almost didn't realize what she was doing. She decided to go outside. She had to buy some food because she hadn't eaten anything for a few days. She just didn't feel hungry. She actually had a high fever. Jessie reached some store and passed out. People called an ambulance and she was taken to the hospital. Actually, nothing really bad happened to her. A nervous shock, a bad cold. Yes, it could have ended very badly. Weakened body did not want to fight the disease. She could have died of pneumonia. Fortunately, the elderly Dr. George Matthews, who admitted her, treated her carefully, examined her, diagnosed her, and prescribed the right treatment. But perhaps it was not only as a complex, interesting case that she attracted George Matthews' attention. He had another interest as well. Examining Jessie, he noticed an unusual birthmark on her shoulder. The girl herself paid no attention to it, as she was used to it. But people around her often asked if it was a tattoo, and it was a birthmark that had been with her all her life. When Jessie felt better, the doctor came in and asked her about the mark, but she just waved it off. Yes, it had been there since birth. Do you know, dear young lady? George Matthews asked her, that you are Rich Harris to a good fortune. What are you saying? Jessie asked indifferently. And what did my fine parents leave me? A collection of wine bottles. Why? Wondered the doctor. Because I remember them perfectly well. They were alcoholics, and they were deprived of parental rights when she was 3 years old. They put her in an orphanage, she said. The doctor's words suddenly interested her for a moment, breaking through the apathy that made her so indifferent to everything around her. But suddenly she remembered her childhood years and the cry of her so-called mother. Take that bastard away, told the doctor, as if to confirm her recollection. No, it wasn't quite like that. Your guardians were not alcoholics. The ones you think of as your father and mother were just guardians. Your mother's name was Mary Valentine. She was a very wealthy woman, but unfortunately she died at a young age because of a rival business. Her father, her husband Scott Williams, was left the heir. Realizing that the competitors, having killed his mother, would not leave the whole family alone, he wrote a will in favor of his daughter Jessie Williams to secure the girl. He gave her to the family of drinking spouses, realizing that the little millionaire there no one will not look for. Meanwhile, he promised the guardians to give money for the child, and apparently for some time faithfully fulfilled his obligations, but after he died himself. But the will was still valid. So now you're the sole heir to a huge fortune. What are you going to do with all this? Jessie asked in surprise. I still don't believe it, she said. Prove your parentage and your right to inherit. I'll help you with that. And then you can live in peace and wealth and do whatever you want. You can get an education, start your own business. The possibilities are endless. I'm sorry, but what you're saying is a fairy tale, Jesse said. My birth certificate says my parents are Scott Williams and Mary Valentine. So what? First and last names aren't that uncommon. And since they're dead, I can't prove anything. I think it's all a bit of a chimera. It would be easier to leave it as it is and not dream of anything. Take your time. I'll help you with the paperwork and everything. You can always count on me. Why? Jesse asked, perplexed. Why do you care so much about all this? Do you hope to get your share? How much will I owe for this? Don't say that, honey. George Matthews replied. I don't want anything from you. Why, I'll be sure to tell you sometime later. Jessie was in the hospital for another week before she came to her senses. During that time, she and George Matthews talked about many things. He told her about his parents, showed her some pictures he had of his father and mother. She, on the other hand, told him all about her love, about what had caused her to fall into a severe depression, as well as about her childhood and dreams. Afterward, she saw how the doctor was sometimes horrified by her stories and wondered why he was so moved by them. After all, he is an outsider. Sure, her story is capable of evoking empathy, but not that much. George Matthews could literally hold back tears at times. But, as you can see, she said, it all turned out well. You know, I've been thinking a lot about what I'm going to do now. It seems like the best thing to do would be to fulfill my childhood dream. I mean, open a restaurant of some kind. I mean, there should be enough money for that. Not a restaurant, of course, but a big restaurant, replied Jesse. No, big is too big. I don't have that kind of education, let alone experience. Thinking of Michael, of course. Would they both be restaurant owners and maybe even competitors? And would he, upon learning of her rise, be surprised, delighted? What to think about that now? He'd probably already forgotten her silly feelings. And if he had, wasn't it time to forget it all? But it had happened. Who hasn't had an unhappy love affair in their youth? Everybody, I suppose. And she should be no exception. Now she had to get on with rebuilding her life, especially since the opportunity seems to have presented itself. She's lived her whole life and never knew she had other parents. I always thought she was the daughter of some alcoholics. That's why her life didn't work out. There you go. The high point of her career was babysitting rich people. And if it wasn't for that, I'd have spent the rest of my life in prison. And in my brief hours of freedom, I'd be licking my lips at restaurants. But now new opportunities have opened up. Had they really opened up, Jessie decided she was going to start living the life she'd once wanted. Well, money opens many doors. But, of course, it wouldn't bring back the love she'd lost. Well, what can I do? I'll wait for the next one then. I thought she was going to call George Matthews. Jessie went to her late father's trustee, proved her parentage, and stepped in to claim her inheritance. Thus, Jessie became a wealthy woman and a very different person. Was it the money? Or was she so influenced by it? Or a broken heart? But she became pragmatic, completely devoid of sentimentality and romantic dreams. At least that's what she looked like outwardly. No one knew that sometimes, alone in her swanky new apartment, she suffered, crying nights, remembering the 3 little ones she considered her own and thinking about how much she wished she could at least look at them. But she wouldn't let herself, afraid that when she approached the house where the 3 lived, she wouldn't see her beloved. Yes, she continued to love Michael, but she was well aware that meeting him would do no good, even if she thought he would want to continue the relationship. She would never agree to that, even if he decided to divorce his wife. But can she forgive how easily he gave up on her once? Since she can't be together with him, then the children are lost forever. But that's okay, Jessie thought sometimes. Maybe I'll find love someday, and I'll have children of my own. But so far no one could touch her heart and all her strength, mental and physical. She directed to the development of her restaurant, small yet. But something more serious she didn't dare to do. But as Jessie chose her assistants quite competently, the business was going uphill, and soon the establishment gained popularity. And the meeting with Michael did happen. They were now in the same circle, so it was no surprise that he met his former lover. Michael was amazed at how much she had changed. "Did you get married?" he asked. "Do you think a woman can only find success by getting married?" Jessie replied coldly. If left alone, she would remain a girl, suitable only as a mistress to a rich man. Pauline," said Michael. "You know very well how I felt about you and how I still feel about you." "Of course I do," she shrugged. "You used me when I was dependent on you, and then you kicked me out. It was no big deal." "But it wasn't," Michael exclaimed. "I remember everything." "How are the children?" Jessie asked what was bothering her the most. "Not bad. You know, they remember you." "I wonder what they remember," she grinned. "They were barely a year old when I left, and now they're about 3. What can they remember?" "Yes, they remember everything. They have a different nanny now, but they remember Nanny Jessie." "Very touching," Jessie said, hiding the fact that her heart squeezed at the news, even if it was false. And she wasn't going to ask Emily. But Michael said, "I'm separated from my wife. That is, she's been gone from me for about a year now. Not about me, not about the kids, of course. I'm sorry for your loss, but I hope they're successfully consoling you on the side." "No, they're just an old good woman. But I can't forget you, Jessie. I know you don't believe me and you can't forgive me, but don't think of me in a bad way. I don't remember you good or bad," she said, and wishing her good luck, she walked away. Yes, her heart was clenching. She wanted to go back and tell Michael that she still loved him, that she didn't forget him for a minute, that she was always pining for him, for the children, but she couldn't do that. Jessie remembered to be proud, to respect herself, and now she had all the reasons to do so and the possibilities. There was only one, to be happy with those she loved truly. It was terribly painful. No amount of money, no amount of success professionally could comfort her. With Michael, they continued to cross paths solely on business. Every time she met his gaze, she knew he wanted her back. And she wanted her back. And in the end, she couldn't take it anymore. Between them, there was an explanation, as a result of which both came to the main probably, the decision in their lives. They love each other and want to be together, and nothing is getting in the way. Plus, Jessie got to meet the little ones and see how they've grown. Jessie realized that they really remembered her. More importantly, she realized she couldn't live without them anymore. "How much have I missed you?" she exclaimed. "They've grown so much, gotten so beautiful, and all that has passed me by. No, I don't want to be the owner of any restaurant. I want to be a nanny." "You can be their mom," Michael said. "Marry me, Jessie, and let's raise our children together." She agreed, and the wedding preparations began. Before applying to the registry office, Jessie still told Michael about how she was able to become the owner of the restaurant. Before that, she said she'd gotten an inheritance without going into details. Now she decided to reveal that it was the will of Scott Williams' father. "What did you say?" Michael exclaimed. "But that was my dad's name, wasn't it?" "So you have a completely different last name." "Yeah, it's my mom's last name, because they weren't married. But as far as I know, my dad was paying me child support before he died." They checked a few more facts of their father's biographies. Michael showed Jessie the pictures, and she realized that her life had crashed again. She was going to marry her half-brother. They had the same father. Who could Jessie run to with this trouble? Clearly, only to the man who had changed her life so much by literally pulling her out of the abyss of despair, George Matthews. Michelle, burying her face in her hands, folded on the table and choking back tears, told of her trouble, and at the end exclaimed, "Well, why did you show me a normal life? Maybe I should have died then." And suddenly, raising her head, she saw a kindly smile on her patron's face. "What are you laughing at?" "No offense, sweetheart," the doctor said and calmed down. "And, adults have their secrets. You're not Scott Williams' own daughter, it just so happens that way. Your mom, Mary Valentine, was a very beautiful, smart woman and very businesslike. She lived with Scott because he was a quiet man. They were very much in love once when they were young, got married. But then the love passed, and they also stayed together." Jessie didn't really understand why George Matthews was telling this, but she listened with interest. After all, this was her parents' story. And they were so comfortable. He had a well-to-do wife. She had a husband who didn't interfere with her business and personal life either. "Mary and I had an affair, you and my daughter. That's just the way it is." Jessie was silent, not knowing how to digest this news. How to even take it in. Did he know? The one who was he considered my father? She asked. The news that Michael was her brother took a back seat. Even the joy of it, she hadn't yet had time to experience. "I don't know, I think he guessed, but he loved you. He was an honest man, a husband, Mom's honest kind. That's why everything he inherited from Mary, he left as an inheritance to you. All the assets belonged to her. He had nothing to do with them and thought they were entitled to use them. But then, why did he disown me? And you too, Jesse exclaimed. No one ever gave up. When Mary died, it was a terrible tragedy for everyone and for him and me. Were we acquainted? Yes, but we never talked about it. And there was no conflict about it. After Mary died, I didn't claim you. I realized Scott couldn't do it without you. He knew he was in danger of losing you too, so he hid you so no one would ever think to look for those marginalized people in the family. Then he died, and I started looking for you, but no luck. I found out you were put in an orphanage. You ran away from there, so I looked for you. I couldn't find any trace of you. My fault. I know, come on now. I did run away myself. So you're my biological father, and your mom is Mary Valentine, and Michael's dad is Scott Williams. Well, I mean, as much as I can see, the money belongs to him. It's just going back to the rifle era with me attached. No, it doesn't. The money belongs to your mom. Scott would never appropriate it and give it to his son. It's Mary's money, so it's yours. You were her only child, and you look just like her. Wait, Michael's mother, Julia Scott, wasn't Scott Williams' wife? There's a whole story there, too. Yeah, I'm telling you, they were all living their own lives. Scott was a normal man, and when things didn't work out with his wife, he hooked up with Julia. And then Michael was born. Tired, George Matthews replied. Yeah, well, the grown-ups did a lot of things to him, but I'm not judging. It happens. The important thing is that Michael and I are not brother and sister. Are we? No, we're not. So you can get married and live happily ever after. And preferably without such stories, said George Matthews. Yes, our parents have exceeded the standard for out-of-bond care because of us, because of our grandchildren. What about you? Are you not well? Jesse exclaimed, noticing how pale the doctor had turned. His face was pained. His confession must have been hard for him. Oh, daughter, let me say that word once in a while. I am ill, you see, and I thank fate that I had time to tell you what I should have told you a long time ago. And forgive us all for being so careless with our lives that we've dragged you all down. Oh, come on. You mean you're a dad? I've always wanted to say that word too. It's too bad Mom's gone. Jesse shared the news with Michael, and they were able to get married and then raise their beloved children. They didn't know much about what was going on in their parents' lives, so they never judged them or remembered the story at all. After all, they were starting their own new one, among other things. It was noticeable by the lingering pain in their stomachs. Jennifer loved this time of year. She could run quietly along the park's paths, breathing in the fresh scent of grass and flowering trees, still warm from the summer heat. And if you go out very early in the morning at 6 o'clock when the sun is just rising, then the pleasant coolness will help to make your morning jog more intense. Besides, not many people like to get up early, and Jennifer liked that. She didn't even take her headphones with her on her jog. She listened to the rustling of the trees and the singing of waking birds. Sometimes squirrels ran, and mice rustled in last year's leaves. The girl could stop and watch the animals. Toward the middle of her training, dog owners came out for a walk with their pets. Some of them Jennifer recognized, as she had met them time and time again. They nodded their greetings and silently went their separate ways. She had started running in high school with a friend. Sandy had decided in her senior year of high school to lose weight for graduation. She was bored with running alone, so she called Jennifer. Jennifer didn't need to lose weight, she was already slim and agile. But how could she not help her friend? But then Sandy got sick, then she stayed up late, then she had important things to do in the morning. In general, there were many excuses, and Sandy's desire to go jogging in the mornings waned. Jennifer, on the other hand, got into it. She felt good after the run, and over time, those 5 to 7 kilometers became a habit. Therefore, even when she moved to another city, she was very happy to find a large park with cozy benches and forest paths near her rented apartment. This morning she ran at an easy pace, as she had missed the previous 2 runs, and didn't want to overload her body before a hard day's work. Through her musings, she heard a rather heavy stomping behind her. "I finally caught up with you," said the young man with a puff of breath. "How fast you run." "No, I'm in no hurry," replied Jennifer. "I don't know. I could hardly get close to you. Maybe you're out of shape today." Maybe Jennifer suggested. I've been out of shape every day lately. Oh, I'm sorry, the man said. My name is Mike. Jennifer. Nice to meet you. I've noticed you running around here in the mornings for a long time. Only usually you're back by the time I get out. Well, today we were lucky enough to get out together. Where are you going? They were approaching a fork in the road toward a new street. Oh, great. Mind if I come with you? Of course not. If it's easier for you. It's much harder for me. But it's time to get back in shape. As they ran up the road together, Jennifer stopped and turned off the tracker. I'm done. Then I'm done too. Can I go jogging with you again tomorrow? Please, 6:30. On this bench here, I'll stretch a little bit first, and then I'll run. Just please don't be late. I'm on the clock. No way. The next morning, when Jennifer arrived at the park, Mike was already waiting for her at the agreed place. They started their warm-up together. How long have you been running? Mike asked. More than 5 years. I started in high school. And you? I've been running since I was about 10. Then, however, after high school, I gave it up. But this year I decided to start again. And you know why? Why? I just saw how you run here every morning with a smile, and frankly speaking, I envied you myself. I've been in a bad mood every morning lately. I thought maybe starting it off with a jog might help. Of course it would. It's the only thing that makes me feel better. Just positive vibes. After warming up, Jennifer ran her usual route again. She tried not to run very fast, but to keep a steady pace so that the young man wouldn't fall behind very much. Mike tried his best to keep up with the girl, but by the 6th kilometer he was finally exhausted. Do you mind if I quit today? Of course not. You can run your own route at your own pace. I'd love to do it with you. I just don't have that kind of training yet. Tomorrow, same place, same time. Yeah, see you then. And Jennifer ran easily ahead. Mike really waited for the girl at the appointed place every day. He ran with her more and more. Gradually, they were getting into the suggested pace. After a couple of weeks, Jennifer already stopped restraining her speed, and the young man kept up with her. You're getting in shape fast, aren't you? She praised Mike after the next session. Thanks to you, my beautiful sparring partner. Can I walk you home today? Aren't you in a hurry to get to work? Not today. I'm on vacation. Wow. Why don't you get some sleep or go somewhere else? I have a lot to do here, but I can spend more time jogging every morning. Well, that's great. Soon you'll be leaving me behind. Why would I want to leave such pleasant company? Now Mike walked Jennifer to the front door every time. It was about 10 minutes from the park to her house, and during that time they chatted about the weather, their activities, and life. That's how Jennifer learned that Mike works as a financial analyst and lives on the other side of the park. He has a car, which he sometimes uses to drive out of town to his dacha, where his parents live year-round. The more the girl talked to him, the more he charmed her with his knowledge, competent speech, friendliness. And the man himself turned out to be handsome. Just don't fall in love, she said to herself as she recalled her morning jogs during the day. You don't want that to happen now. But the more often she repeated this mantra to herself, the harder it was for her not to remember her morning companion. On their day off, after another workout, they walked up to the driveway. I can buy you a delicious morning coffee, Jennifer offered her companion. And at that moment she thought with horror, why am I saying this? I wish he'd say no, and she was greatly relieved when Mike agreed with pleasure. They went into the apartment. Jennifer invited her guest into the kitchen and put the coffee maker on. Do you mind? I'm going to take a shower for now, she asked. No, of course I feel at home, Mike laughed. The girl giggled and went into the bathroom. The next time they went jogging, they got caught in a heavy rain. And after they went up to Jennifer's house, she suggested that the man go into the bathroom to wash his feet, which were covered in mud. Could I stay? He asked. You don't worry. I'll be quick. Sure, Jennifer gave him a towel. Drinking coffee on weekends after a run had become their tradition. They took turns in the shower, too, until one day they bumped into each other in the doorway, and the girl felt the urge to snuggle up to the man. Mike put his arm around her lightly and began kissing her. at first gently, and then realizing that the girl did not resist, more and more insistently and passionately. It was then, after their first intimacy, that Jennifer learned that Mike was married. "I probably shouldn't have done that," he murmured, cuddling the girl in bed. "You didn't like it?" She was upset. "No, it felt really good. You know, how can I put it? Well, it turns out I cheated on my wife." "So you're married?" She jumped up on the bed. "Why didn't you tell me before?" "Well, somehow I didn't have to. As it is about my parents at the dacha told me about the car too. And about my wife I didn't have a chance. Do you have kids?" "Yes, 2 daughters. So pack up and get out of here. And don't let me see you around me again." "But why?" "I'm so sorry I didn't warn you. I didn't think it would go this far. And then I couldn't stop. You're so beautiful." "Is that why you decided to deceive me?" "I didn't decide anything." Jennifer was sitting in the kitchen, staring off into the distance. How did this happen? She thought. Why didn't I ask him right away? Why did I let it come to this? Then she remembered how attracted she had been to Mike and felt even more remorseful. When Jennifer was a little girl, her father, who called her the most wonderful daughter in the world, suddenly left her mother for another woman. Jennifer then did not understand the complex parental relationships, but fiercely hated her father's new girlfriend. As a teenager, she firmly decided for herself that she would not have affairs with married men. She didn't want other children to experience what she had when her father left. And now she found herself in the position of a mistress herself. Jennifer decided not to cross paths with Mike anymore and began to figure out how she could change the time or route of her runs. The next day, she didn't see anyone. And then she didn't either. On the one hand, the girl was glad that she was no longer tempted, but on the other hand, she resented the fact that she was so easily forgotten after the first time. No more meetings or phone calls. On Saturday, she went into the entrance and suddenly found Mike at the door of his apartment in his usual clothes with a large bouquet in his hands. He rushed over to the girl. "I'm so sorry, please, I didn't know this would happen. I realized I really want to be with you. Don't chase me away, and listen to me." Jennifer stopped at the stairs, but realized that there was no way she was going to get into the apartment unless she talked to Mike. "Why are you here?" "I wanted to apologize. These are for you," he held out the flowers. "You're the best, and I feel really bad without you." "Thank you," Jennifer answered dryly, but her heart was jumping with joy. "Let me through." She walked over and opened the door. "May I wash my hands?" the man asked modestly. "I got them dirty while I was waiting for you." The girl shrugged her shoulders. "Come in." Mike went into the bathroom. Jennifer started looking for a vase, which she didn't remember where she had put away since she hadn't received flowers as a gift in a long time. As she bent down to look for the vase in the nightstand, Mike came up behind her and put his arm around her. Let go, she tried to pull away. He squeezed her even tighter. "I'm sorry, I can't do this without you." The girl resisted, but at some point she suddenly realized that she too wanted everything to happen again. She turned and kissed the man. All principles went to waste. Mike rarely showed up for a run now, but he was always waiting for her outside her driveway or apartment. They would go in, tear each other's clothes off with fury, and make love to exhaustion. Then reluctantly they would pull away from each other, and the man would leave. And Jennifer went about her daily business. Every workday she looked forward to the weekend and a new date. You convinced yourself not to fall in love. And not only did you completely dissolve into this man, but you broke your own rules. He's married and has daughters. And you are just a mistress with whom he is resting from family boredom, the girl thought. She was about to come to terms with her situation when she suddenly discovered that she was pregnant. This was not part of her plans at all. Her salary was barely enough for a rented apartment and life. And then there was a baby. The girl decided to have an abortion. Only there was a problem: the procedure was done for a fee, and Jennifer did not have the means. So she decided to tell Mike about the pregnancy. He is also involved in her situation. When the man came to her once again, after intimacy, she said, "I'm pregnant." What he asked her again. "I feel so good with you that I got pregnant. I have to have an abortion, but I don't have the money. Will you help pay for it?" "What abortion?" Mike exclaimed. "It's beautiful. I love you and the baby so much. Give me a son, please." I only have 2 daughters. May you and I have a son." Mike looked at the girl pleadingly. She was very surprised at his reaction, which she had not expected from a married man. Jennifer assumed that there would be a scandal, threats, the breakup of the relationship. But the joy of it completely threw her off balance. "But how, Mike? You're married, aren't you? What kind of son would I have? How am I supposed to raise him? I can barely make a living on my own." "I'll help you. I'll get a nanny. I'll give you money. I can't get a divorce, but I will recognize the child. Please don't have an abortion. Give me a little boy, my dear." "I'll think about it," Jennifer said. And indeed, she thought for a long time. The girl went to the doctor, clarified the deadline by which she had to make a decision, and thought about what she should do. On the one hand, she realized that all the care of the child would fall on her. Mike would only be a Sunday dad. On the other hand, she loved this man so much that somewhere inside she was thinking, "I will give birth to his son. He will see how good we are together, and will definitely divorce and come to live with me through the prism of his love." There was no way Jennifer could adequately evaluate her actions. She needed to consult someone, so she called Sandy, her best friend, who by that time already had a husband and a child. "You're a piece of work," was the first thing her friend said when she heard the news from Jennifer. "And who's the daddy?" "That's not the point. That's not the point. I'm not getting married. I want an abortion. And he's telling me to keep the baby." "Are you crazy? What abortion? Of course you should have the baby. You don't know how happy it is to look at a little person who loves you for nothing. When I look at Mikey, I'm filled with love too." "Sandy, you're married. What if I have a baby and I have to raise it alone in a rented apartment with a small salary? I can't afford it." "Isn't your dad planning on helping out?" "They promised to provide." "But I can't rely on that. I don't know what anyone's saying." "I don't know, Jennifer. They say there's a bunny. There's a law, and I can't support you in your decision to have an abortion. I look at Mikey and I think, how could this be? It wouldn't be such a miracle." "Okay, thanks. At least I talked to someone. Come on, I'll keep thinking. I still don't think I should terminate the pregnancy. I haven't made up my mind yet." When Mike found out about Jennifer's pregnancy, he became even more alert and attentive. He came much more often and constantly asked what her plans were. In the end, the girl believed that the man would not abandon her with her son. And even without voicing the decision to herself, she as if by accident missed all the deadlines for abortion. "When else can I have an abortion?" she asked. Mike was very happy. "I'm going to have a son," he murmured as he nursed Jennifer back to health, giving her money for doctors and vitamins and accompanying her to checkups. Jennifer was terrified of what would happen if she had a daughter. But at the next ultrasound, the doctor confirmed her father's hunch. "You're having a son, Mommy," she said to Jennifer lying on the couch. Jennifer smiled. "I'm starting to believe that after the baby is born, things will get better." She took maternity leave from work, and the following spring Jennifer had a baby boy who looked a lot like Mike. She named her son Stephen. There was a dash in the father's name. "I'm definitely going to adopt him," Mike said, "but only a little later." "Okay, sweetheart. Look at the little guy." The older the boy got, the less often Mike showed up at Jennifer's house, and the less money he gave her. It got to the point where she couldn't afford to buy formula for her son. So she called the man she loved. "Why are you calling me?" He got angry at the young mom. "You don't realize that if I don't show up, it means I can't. And in general, I now have financial problems. I cannot support another child. You gave birth to it. You have to raise it yourself." "Oh yeah? You said we'd raise it together. I don't have enough allowance." "I don't know what I said. I don't have time for you right now. I'll come if I can. Don't call me again." Jennifer sat by the baby's crib, quietly holding back tears so as not to wake the baby. Well, what am I going to do, she thought. I shouldn't have trusted the man, no matter how sweet the promises he made. She felt bad for herself, for her son, and for the fact that she had been so foolish to rely on a complete stranger who had deceived her and was also rude. When the girl calmed down a little, she began to think about how to live on. Marilyn was very surprised to receive a call from her apartment at an unannounced time. Usually Jennifer only called her to inform her of a rent transfer. But now was clearly a different number. "Oh, my heart smells something's up," the woman thought as she picked up the phone. "Hello, Jennifer. Marilyn, please excuse me. I'm having temporary financial difficulties right now. Could you please hold off on paying me this month? Oh, that's a shame. I've been planning what I'm going to use the money for, but I'll wait until a better time. Something came up. It's not a big deal. It's just that my paycheck's late at work. All right, Jennifer, just let me know when you send me the full amount. I will, Marilyn. Thank you so much. Goodbye, darling. Starling. The woman hung up the phone and, shaking her head, muttered, "Something must have happened after all." Entering the room, Maxim asked her, "What did you say?" He had just arrived to help with the move to the dacha for the summer season. "No, nothing. The girl who rents my apartment asked for an extension. She says she's behind on her paycheck. You know, I was thinking, I'll leave you her phone number. You check her out sometime." "Mike, okay. Just make sure there's nothing wrong with it, nothing illegal. It's her first time filming, but there's a first time for everything." "Marilyn, okay, son, don't worry, I'll take care of it. I've already taken her stuff out to the elevator, so it's time to get dressed." Marilyn went to her room to put her medication in her bag and dress warmly. It was a chilly start to summer. After talking to the landlady, Jennifer immediately pulled out the money she had set aside for rent, got dressed and went with the baby to the store to get formula. But this is only temporary, just for once, she thought. What to do next? To get a job, you need a nanny. But what kind of nanny if I can't even buy pantyhose on my paycheck? When she returned with boxes of food for her son and put him to sleep in the stroller on the balcony, the girl picked up her phone and dialed a number. "Emily, hello, I'd like to get off vacation next month." "That's fine, Jennifer. We're waiting for you. But we're not getting any pay raises, and we're running out of money." "Yes, but I need a nanny to go to work." "Well, I'm sorry, I can't make you happy. We're having problems at the company right now, even layoffs. You're lucky you're legally exempt. But frankly, it's not good." "What if I go part-time and find a part-time job somewhere else? They won't fire me." "Why would you and I have to go public with this? We won't tell anyone. And besides, you'll have child support. It's a small amount, but it'll be a better income. And, you know, I can write you a quarterly welfare check. I don't think it would be a bad idea." "What about layoffs?" "The financial aid is under another article, so one can't interfere with the other." "Oh, thank you, Emily. Then I'll come to work with you soon, of course." Jennifer worked as an assistant in the economics department. She had no specialized training. When she joined the company as a secretary, her smartness was quickly noticed, and she was offered the position with a small salary increase. Jennifer was pleased, because she preferred to work with papers rather than to meet people and prepare tea and coffee for the bosses. And the first person who helped her to get used to the new place was Emily, the head of the HR department. Jennifer was grateful to her and was always happy to come into her office. Now, after the conversation, she hung up the phone and felt ashamed of her request. But perhaps Emily was the only person in whose decency Jennifer was sure. In the evening, when the girl had just put her son to bed, the front doorbell suddenly rang loudly. Well, who has brought resented inwardly the girl? Son, after all, will wake up in her soul. There was still a lingering hope that Mike, who had not appeared or called for more than a month. On the threshold stood an unfamiliar man about 30 to 35 years old. "Jennifer, hi. I'm Ben, Amber's son." "Hi. Come on in." "I'm sorry I didn't call. My mom left me your number." "Well, I was just driving by, so I thought I'd stop by." "Maybe you're home. Are you here for the money?" "I thought we agreed with your mom about an extension." "No, I'm not here for the payment. She said she put it off. It's just that I took her to the cottage the other day, and she asked me to stop by and see if I needed any help. A leaky faucet or a loose knob. It's an old apartment, after all." That's when the baby cried in the room. "Oh, wait a second," Jennifer rushed to her son. She rocked the baby's crib and he calmed down. "You have a baby?" Surprised son of the hostess. And here I was making a fuss. I woke him up. "I'm sorry, but my mom didn't warn me." Jennifer lowered her eyes. When she'd met Amber, it had only been about renting an apartment. She'd said, "Oh, it's so nice that you're alone. No dogs or kids or anything like that. Otherwise they'll trash the whole apartment, chew up the furniture. The kids will draw on the wallpaper." "I'm alone," Jennifer laughed at the time. and I don't plan to have any dogs or kids yet." "That's fine," the woman said. "Then I'll be happy to rent you a place to live," and she signed the contract. "Son," Jennifer answered Max's question. "He's 5 months old. Your mom doesn't know yet." I didn't have the heart to tell her. "Congratulations. Are you going to live here as a family now, or are you going to move in with your husband?" "I don't have a husband," Jennifer said, and went all in. "That's why I asked your mom to postpone the payment. I have nothing but my allowance right now. But I've already made a deal, and next month I'll start working. Then I'll be able to pay off my debt and keep paying." "And who will take care of the child?" the man asked. "A nanny, probably," sighed the girl. "But I haven't found one yet. They all ask for my salary for this, and I still have to pay you and feed my son something. But I'll definitely manage, don't you think?" "Just wait a bit, I'll pay you. I'm looking for a second job. Maybe I'll clean the entrances of our house. Then I won't need a nanny. I can babysit for my neighbor." "Can I sit down?" Max asked, and without waiting for permission, settled on a bench in the hallway. "And what do you work?" "Assistant economist." "We have a good company. I've already talked to the head of the personnel department. She promised me a quarterly financial aid, and I can leave work early." "How much do you expect to make, if it's no secret?" Jennifer gave me a number. "Do you think it's enough money for 2 people with a baby to live in a rented apartment?" Max wondered. "It will be difficult, but I can do it," she answered. "Parents, relatives, friends, finally? Make the father pay child support?" Jennifer shook her head negatively. "He's married. He has 2 daughters. He didn't care about aesthetics. And when you decided to have a baby, excuse me, what were you thinking? Mike asked for a son and promised he'd help and adopt him. And you believed him?" "I see. Well, can we see the hero of this soap opera?" Jennifer nodded and quietly led Ben into the room where the round baby was sleeping and smiling on the couch, covered with blankets so he wouldn't fall. The man couldn't hold back a smile, reached out a hand to him, then pulled it away and walked back out into the hallway. "What am I going to do with you?" He looked anxiously around the apartment. "Jennifer, I think she'll be kicked out of the apartment soon," she asked quietly. "Can I stay here for a couple more months, till I find another place to live? I don't have anywhere else to go, only to the street." "No, I won't kick you out. I'm thinking about how to handle this situation. Let's do this. I won't say anything to my mom yet. For the next couple of months, I'll pay it myself and tell her as if you did it. But in return, you'll give me the coordinates of your work so I can see if you're telling me the truth. I'm sorry, but these are the times." "Of course I understand. And then when you get a job, get a nanny and get your life together, then we can talk about payments again." "Okay." Chuckles, "Thank you so much, Ben. I didn't expect you to be so understanding. I thought you'd just send me out the door. I want to help you regain your faith in people. Not everyone's a scoundrel like your Mike." "He's not a scoundrel. He just can't leave his family for us. It's a testament to his integrity." "Yeah, it's his integrity that made him choose to leave you." "Okay, I hate to talk about him. Here's my phone number. If you need any help, call me and I'll try to solve the problem. Have a good day." The man walked out the door. "Goodbye. And thank you again." Back home, Ben had dinner and tried to read the news on the internet. There was only one problem: he didn't realize what he was reading because he was mentally going back to his conversation with Jennifer. No, it was understandable that a naive fool trusted some scoundrel. But how on earth does a guy like that get around? At home, he's probably a good family man. Tells stories from work, goes for walks with his daughters, and does not think that someone can do the same to them when they grow up. And now she's got to get out of it. In a week to visit her, at least bring diapers and baby food. It'll be easier. But at the end of the week, Jennifer called. "Hello, Ben. You said that if something broke." Yeah. "What's wrong, Jennifer?" "The washing machine. It's broken, and it won't heat the laundry. And I'm like a handicap without it, aren't I?" "But you understand." "I understand perfectly. When will you be home tomorrow?" "All day." "Where will I go?" "I haven't gotten a job yet, and I haven't found a nanny yet. I'll take the baby for walks. But if necessary, he can sleep in the stroller on the balcony." Right, Ben's mind flashed. She needs a crib, too. Her son sleeps on her couch. Our old, beat-up couch, the one his father remembers. First of all, don't wait up for me. Just do your thing. Just make some room around the car. All right. Okay, I got it. Ben worked at a publishing house where most of the staff worked remotely, only occasionally coming into the office. However, they all shared a chat room where he'd thrown in the need for a crib. Within a couple hours, he received 3 offers to give it away for free with pictures. After looking at them carefully, he chose one. Ben drove up the same day and picked up the crib. In addition, he received several rattles, a pacifier, and other baby accessories. Heading to the office, he was pleased with the future surprise for Jennifer and her son. In addition, he also ordered a washing machine with delivery. To put in a new one, the old one was already more expensive to repair. Ben, did you get married? Jacob, an old acquaintance and editor of the publishing house, greeted him. No. Why would you say that? What about the chat room newsletter? Or do you need this as a prop? No, it's not for me. It's just some girls I know who need help. Girls? But that means you're getting married soon, his colleague winked at him. I didn't think so, Ben smiled. On Saturday, as soon as the delivery guy called and said they'd be there in an hour and a half, Ben rushed to Jennifer's house. She was just feeding her son when he arrived, laden with a disassembled crib and other things. Don't get distracted by me, the young man said to the girl. I'll get everything out of the car, and only then I'll do the washing machine. Okay, Jennifer nodded, continuing to coax the baby to eat the applesauce she had just made from the last remaining apple. And in good conscience, she should have had time to go to the store today. But she didn't bother telling Ben that. The man brought in all his things, undressed, and made his way to the room. Jennifer could hear him moving furniture from the kitchen and wondered, not realizing what he was doing. Maybe Amber asked me to find something, she thought. Then Jennifer heard the sound of an instrument, took her son in her arms, and went with him into the room. Ben had assembled the crib and fastened the sides to it. There was already a crib mattress and blanket inside. Ben, why? We were doing just fine without a crib. It's just a waste. You're not going to need a crib anytime soon, are you? At least until the age of 2, a child shouldn't be ruining his spine sleeping on an unequipped couch. I didn't spend any money. My coworkers gave it to me for free. Their daughter had grown up. They didn't know where to put her. And a lot of other rattles. The man nodded at the big bag in the corner. And in the hallway, 2 packages of diapers. These are a gift from me. Put them back where you keep them. Oh, and by the way, there's a bunch of different jars of purees in there. I didn't know which ones you wanted, so I got a few different ones. But I see you've already eaten. Ben, thank you. But how am I going to pay you back? Why do you keep talking about money? You don't have to pay me back. They're all gifts. That's when the intercom buzzed. Here comes the washing machine. Today you'll have everything in perfect order. The movers lifted the machine to the floor, disconnected, and took the old one. I decided it was easier to replace it than to repair it at the store. It's a promotion. They take the old machine back to recycle field. So I saved money, Ben explained. Here's the manual for you to study for now. I'm going to go plug it in. By yourself. Jennifer was surprised. By myself, of course. It's a simple thing to do. Why waste money on installation? 3 hours after Ben's arrival, the new, almost silent washing machine was running. Archie sat in the assembled crib, which Jennifer had made up, and played with the new rattles. The girl and her son were drinking tea in the kitchen. You see, the man smiled. Life is getting better, and when you get a job, it will be beautiful. But I can't find a nanny for reasonable money. They are all some governesses come across, who promise to talk to him in 3 languages, to teach him. And I just need to feed him and take him for walks, at least on the balcony. Maybe you're looking there today? Try among pensioners to look for those who have just gone on vacation. They still have enough strength and can watch the child, and their demands are not cosmic. Where to find them? You will not rush to every elderly person on the street with such a question. Ask at work. And to do that, you have to go out there, and I can't go out there until Stepa's settled in. It's a vicious circle. Let me ask my friends in the chat room if anyone has such acquaintances. I can't promise results. We've already found a crib. Maybe we can find a nanny too. Thank you, Ben, but I don't feel comfortable asking you. You've done so much already, and we're nothing to you. You're my long-term investment. I'm interested in you keeping this apartment and paying rent. So consider it an investment in my secure old age. What old age? You're still a young man. That's something to think about when you're young. But I'm 32 now, so I'm not as young as you might think. I'm 23, she smiled. Oh, it's bedtime after all. I'm going to put him on the balcony. We'll go for a walk. Or maybe you and I will go for a walk in the park. He sleeps in the stroller there, and we'll go for a walk. Do you have time for that? Why not? It's the weekend. Get some fresh air? Jennifer started hesitantly. All right then. You get dressed, Archie, and I'll get the stroller out, Ben said before she could finish. When Ben entered the office, he saw Jacob walking toward him with a smile. He's going to ask about getting married again, he braced himself. Ben, are you considering men as nannies? Ben hesitated. He and Jennifer hadn't discussed that option. I don't know that you want to offer yourself, he smiled back. What about publishing? No, I wouldn't mind. But I've got a lot of unfinished business to take care of, so I'll hold off for now. But I have an older brother, a retired lieutenant colonel in the security services, retired a long time ago. He used to work part-time, but now he says he's fed up. I want something more peaceful. He stayed at home for 6 months and howled. Kids are grown up, no grandchildren. He doesn't like technology. He used to like to go camping with the school. But now, to get a job there, you have to collect a lot of different certificates. And he's not in good health. Jacob continued. I was at home, humming at your message. He's excited about it. He wants to try it. Well, I don't know if taking care of a small child is a relaxing thing to do. So maybe you'll give it a shot. I'll talk to the baby's mom. Good, because I don't know how she'll react, Ben said. Sure. He has a car, by the way. He can bring it in and drive it if necessary. I can do that. Okay, I'll tell him. Robert was not only older than his brother, but taller and broader in the shoulders. He limped a little and came to meet the mother of a possible ward. When asked about the limp, the man always answered evasively. His car pulled into the backyard of the house with difficulty. Ben, of course, was also present. Jennifer's reaction to the suggestion of taking a man as a babysitter was calm. I guess we're just used to the nanny always being a woman, but a man can do the same thing. And it's definitely easier for him to carry a stroller with a baby. Let's get acquainted. If Archie's not scared, why not? Archie not only wasn't scared, but even smiled when the older man took him in his arms and touched his eyes and nose with his fingers. Wow, he's so cooperative. Robert laughed softly. So are we friends now? Archie started babbling something back and blowing bubbles. It was the first time Jennifer had ever seen a child react to a stranger in such a way, and she smiled. What about money? She asked the future babysitter, explaining the child's daily routine to him. Well, Jennifer, for me it's more pleasure than money. But I'm just getting a job. I can't even pay a full-time nanny at the average rate. So you'll pay half. Ben and I will talk about it. What's Ben got to do with it? The girl was surprised. He's my son and the nanny. But it's none of my business, Robert interrupted. I'm sorry, for God's sake. I'm an old-school man, and I simply can't take money from a woman, much less from such a charming girl. You'll talk to Ben about how much you're willing to pay me. He'll pay well. Otherwise, I'll take any amount. I understand a week, 2 weeks, a month. We'll see how it goes. This is new to me, too. My wife raised my kids. I was always on duty or on assignment. And now the kids are grown. My wife's gone. Oh, what am I talking about? So if my services suit you, and I realize that I can cope, then we'll discuss the final scene. And if not, I'm sorry. But I'll find someone else to replace me so you won't be left without a nanny. Thank you, Jacob, Ben said. It's a deal. Can we do one more thing? Jacob asked. What's that? Just call me Bob. It's awkward. Are you much older? You can call me Bob, and you can call me Bob on a first-name basis. That's what my wife used to call me when she was angry, he smiled. Alas, they've gotten a little crazy. That means I was wrong about something. Why wouldn't you be? Ben wondered. I don't know, it's just the way it's been since we met. They called me Rybakov at school and at the college too. Or just Okop. She didn't like it, so she came up with a consonant. All right, we'll agree on that, Ben said. You'll just be grandfather to the baby. Is that okay? Of course it's okay. I don't think he'll understand it now. That's good. Why don't you show me how to pack for a walk and we'll go for a walk? You've got a nice park nearby. Bob, with the stroller, proudly stepped forward, and behind him, Jennifer and Ben walked side by side, taking their time. What do you think of the candidate? Ben asked. First impressions are very favorable. If he can handle the baby as well as he does during the day, I don't think we'll find a better old lady. I liked him too. He and his brother look alike, by the way. Only he struggled to find the words, but finally came up with one. What's his? Monumental. Reliable then? Jennifer smiled. Except I still don't understand why you're helping me. I explained it to you last time. It's a long-term investment. But seriously, I realize I can help. Why don't you? Especially since the labor is minimal. I'm the one paying him. If I find out you're paying, I'll find another apartment and leave. All right. Don't worry. Everything will be just the way you want it. Finally, Jennifer went to work. First thing she did was go to Emily's with a box of chocolates. Oh, it's so good to see you, Jennifer. The woman was so happy. Come in, the candy is just in time. Now with you, we will drink tea, and you tell me about your life. How is your baby? Did you find a nanny? I found one, the girl nodded. But the nanny is a man, ex-military or something else. I do not know, frankly speaking. He was so caring. Memorized everything from the first time. He watches over the child. So sometimes I'm ashamed that I don't look like that. Anyway, we spent a month together looking at each other to see if we're right for each other. And? How's the kid reacting? He likes it a lot. He shuts up in Robert Alexeyevich's arms and sleeps peacefully. And where did you find such a treasure? Long story. Jennifer waved her hand. Kind people helped. That's right. There are more good people than there are good people. That's why you have to rely on them. How are things going at the company? No, I'm just retiring and handing things over. I briefly told my replacement about you. She says the new CFO is coming in. She'll take it up with him. Jennifer said the money for such help comes from the social fund. But in her opinion, that didn't convince Amber. So we're getting a new supervisor. I mean, how long can we go on without a CFO? I mean, we have his former deputy acting CFO. Apparently someone's not happy with him. They say they're looking for a new candidate. All right, apply while you still can. They'll get you the money. Thank you so much for everything and for them, and for the human attitude, Amber said. How long do you work until? Until the end of the month. And what are you planning to do after that? A vegetable garden in the country, Amber said. I don't like gardens. Mike laughed. You can quietly. And then you cannot pull it out, yes. And the son, apparently it was passed on. He and his wife and daughter spend all summer. And I would rather be in the city, in the parks, to walk, cafes, go to the museum. Well, to be honest, I don't know yet. Why don't you come and visit us? You'll get to know each other. At least look at someone you actually saved with your help. Don't exaggerate. But if you invite us, we'll definitely drop by sometime. Can I write down your address? Or do you have a different one? No, it's still the same. You have your phone number. Call me if there's anything I can do for you. Thank you. I hope you don't need IT. Jennifer was sad all day. She had developed a very good relationship with the head of HR, and she was sorry to see her go. And these musings now and then thoughts of how she was going to get on with her life crept in. Well, nothing. The new boss will appear. I'll go to him myself, ask him. He's a human being. He should understand. We can try to look for another job. Maybe I should talk to Ben. I mean, come on. The slightest problem I have, I think he'll think I'm on his ass. I'll manage on my own. All these thoughts were interrupted by Archie's morning call. Jennifer, I'm sorry, for God's sake, but I'm sick. It's been a long time since I've been sick. I'm actually very hardened. Temperature's 39 today. Well, I can't go to the baby's house in case it's contagious, sure. Sure, Jennifer reassured him. I'll take the day off work. Feel better. I really need you. And Archie, even more, I'll make it quick. I'll make it quick. Okay. I'm sorry I let you down. No need to apologize, Archie. Well, you've been a great help to me for almost a year. Jennifer was about to object, but suddenly she ran out of steam. After losing part of her income in the form of financial aid, it would have been nice. But she was ashamed to even bring it up in front of herself. We'll talk about it later, she said into the phone. Get well. That weekend, when Ben arrived and Jennifer complained to him about her forced vacation without pay, he asked, "Do you want me to pay this month's bonus? Why are you all about the money?" Jennifer replied, "You'd better go over there and ask him how he's feeling. Although I think if I call him, he'll take it as a request to come see the baby sooner." "Okay, I'll talk to him. Don't worry." "Yes, I also cut my salary at work." Suddenly the girl complained to him. "How?" Ben was indignant. "They have no right. According to our labor laws, it's forbidden. Only if you reduce the working day." "No, I had financial aid." "Remember, I told you that the head of the personnel department wrote it out to me. Well, she retired, and the new one won't do it without the CFO's approval." "And what?" He said no. "He hasn't started work yet. He's new. He'll start on the 3rd. What if you go talk to him yourself?" "I've already thought about it. I guess I'll have a look at him to see if he's even in my position or not." "Hang in there, Jennifer. Maybe you should look for another job. I've thought about that too. But even looking at what I'm making in this position, I'm not being offered anything else. I'm not good at anything else. Jennifer, I want you to know that if you decide to quit, I'll help you out financially while you look for a new job." "Ben, I already owe you everything. I don't even want to consider it." On Sunday, Emily came to visit. They sat in the kitchen and drank tea with a cake that the woman had baked for Jennifer and Archie. "To be honest, I'm not much of a cook, but it's our family recipe." And everyone said it was delicious. Of course, maybe they're flattered, but it's better than store-bought, Emily said. "Emily, you really are an amazing hostess." "Thank you so much," Jennifer said. "How's retirement life treating you?" "You know, I was worried it would be boring. But now I don't even have any free time. I was saving time for you at 12 today. Didn't you promise to introduce him to my boy's toy?" Archie brought the woman all his toys and showed her how to play with them. Emily didn't get to play with him until Jennifer took him out to rest. Come, I'll do the dishes here," the woman told her. "Oh, come on, don't." "Yes, you do. You should rest too." When Archie was asleep, the women settled down in the kitchen. And Emily said seriously, "Actually, I've come for one more thing. I want to warn you about your future boss. They say he's an excellent specialist, but he's not much of a man, but I don't know him personally. It's just a rumor. But you should be careful about opening up to him. Let HR ask him for you." "Okay," Jennifer shrugged. "What can he do? The only thing he can do is fire me. But then he'd have to pay severance. I don't know what he'll do, but don't trust him." "Okay. I promise everything will be fine, Emily, don't worry." At that moment, Jennifer heard the sound of a key in the keyhole and the door opening. "I wonder who it is," the girl thought, stepping out into the hallway. Ben and Jacob were the only ones with keys. Ben wouldn't have arrived without a call. Jacob stood on the doorstep. "Jennifer, I'm sorry, for God's sake," he whispered. "I know Archie's asleep at this hour, and I didn't call so I wouldn't wake him." "It's okay," she nodded. "Why are you here?" "Because of Amber. I feel guilty. I wish I could give you half a day off." Jacob walked into the kitchen and stopped in the doorway. "I didn't realize you had company." "Hello, I'm honored to introduce myself." Jacob stood in front of Emily. "Emily," she smiled and gestured him to a chair. "Please have a seat. Archie and I just met today." She looked at Jennifer with a smile. "Emily and I worked at the same company, and we decided to meet today. I hope I'm not interrupting anything." "Of course not," the woman smiled and set the third mug on the table. "So you two aren't working together anymore?" Jacob asked. "I'm ashamed to admit it, but I'm retired." Emily lowered her eyes flirtatiously. Jennifer grinned at the spectacle being played out in front of her by people twice her age. "What's there to be ashamed of? I've been retired for 15 years, and I'm not ashamed of it at all. I can say of such a fine lady that retirement is the beginning of life," Jacob said. "I was just telling Jennifer that I don't have much free time yet. I'm reading books, learning computer programs, going on field trips." You know, all the things I've been putting off for so many years because of work. How did your family feel about that? Jacob asked. What family? Emily waved her hand. Her husband had passed away a long time ago, and the children were grown, independent. I don't like that. I don't like that. No, well, you speak my words. I slapped myself on the knee. God with it, I understand you perfectly well. And she listened to the conversation between her older friends and found much in common. Then Archie woke up and she retired to her son's room, leaving the two of them alone. Jennifer, we thought we'd go for a walk, Jacob asked her, peering into the room. Do you mind? Of course not. Don't you need me, Jennifer? The man winked at her. There's no third person. I thought the third was Archie. Jennifer also smiled. The children are beyond competition. It was at this time that the baby saw his babysitter and reached for him. The morning newsletter at work delighted Jennifer with the news. Dear colleagues, you are invited to join us today at 11:00 a.m. in the conference room. There will be an introduction to the new CFO of our company. He will tell you about the principles of his work and discuss further plans for the development of our company. Well, at last rejoiced the girl. At least some certainty. And then to live with the unknown tomorrow is worse than ever. There was excitement in the women's restroom. All the young female employees were tidying up before the meeting to seduce him. Are we going to do it in a bunch? The married ladies asked them. Or is he single? Married. Married, confirmed one of the girls. But they say he's no stranger to the female sex. You can be a mistress to begin with. And then, who knows, suddenly you'll be a wife. Jennifer only chuckled inwardly as she listened to these conversations. She'd been down this road, and it hadn't ended well. No, of course I have Archie, and that's fine. But the rest of it? No way, just strictly business negotiations, she thought to herself. Or quit. At 11:10, the conference room hummed quietly like a beehive as the CEO walked in, followed by William. Jennifer closed her eyes in surprise. Sorry I'm late, the CEO said. I'd like to introduce you to our new manager, Mike. He is now in charge of all financial matters. And thank goodness. Because frankly speaking, I'm tired of your wishes, he smiled. Please, Mike, you have the floor. Hello. Mike stood next to the chair and slowly looked around the room. First of all, let me say that my lateness today is an unforgivable oversight. I believe that all of us should work with the precision of a Swiss watch, as a single mechanism. That means no tardiness, no leaving early, and no excuses. Only a doctor's note can influence the decision to take disciplinary action. And that, please note, frequent illness indicates that you do not take good care of your health. And with such we will not be on the way. The hall whispered. The new chief started his speech too harshly. You will ask all the questions later, he continued, interrupting some employees who raised their hands to clarify some points. Secondly, and then William hesitated, meeting Jennifer's eyes. The girl sat staring at him without taking her eyes off him. Nothing betrayed the emotions that raged in her soul. And it was not hatred, contempt, or even pity. No, she suddenly realized to herself that it was love. A hard, dependent, unreachable love that forgave him for everything he had done to her life. And if she were asked now if she would repeat that path, she would undoubtedly answer in the affirmative. William was still saying something. Jennifer looked at him and realized how much she had missed him in the partial couple of years she hadn't seen him. It was one thing to not see a person and quite another to have them reappear in your life, and seemingly faded feelings suddenly rekindle. After the meeting, everyone went to their workplaces. Since the economics department reported directly to the new director, Mike's office was in their wing, right next to Jennifer's. Jennifer sat quietly at her desk and tried to concentrate, but all her thoughts were on him. That's when her phone lit up. A text from Mike came in. Tomorrow at 9 in my office. Jennifer couldn't believe her eyes. Reread the message and replied, okay, then tried to tune in to work. All night she had hardly slept at all. Jennifer would get up, walk over to her son's bed and smile, thinking, we're definitely going to be okay now. She was sure Mike wouldn't say no to her. After all, this was his only son too. Jennifer pondered what to wear to the meeting to look both businesslike and attractive, but came up with nothing. As she was getting ready in the morning, she found a short black skirt in her closet that she had once worn on dates with him and decided to wear it. Wow. Jennifer, are you going to a business meeting today? The mirror on the wall asked. Yes, a very important one, she nodded. Well, good luck then. You look great. a real modern businesswoman. Jennifer smiled and drove to work. "Come in." Mike jumped up and locked the office door behind her, so we wouldn't be interrupted. "So you work here?" Yes, she nodded. "How did you end up at our company? Weren't you a financial analyst?" "Well, it's not far from one or the other. Circumstances worked out. It's good to see you. You're still running in the park, looking great." "No, I'm not up to it right now, but hopefully I'll be able to resume training soon." "Great, have a seat." He pointed to the couch. "Tell me about your life. How's Archie?" So he's interested in his son, too, Jennifer thought. It didn't matter what his circumstances were. "He's fine, he's growing up. We're planning to start kindergarten soon." And now with a nanny, Jennifer didn't go into details. "Wow, you can afford a nanny? Your salaries are pretty good." Jennifer sighed. "I've been meaning to talk about you." She hesitated when she felt his hand on her shoulder. Mike moved closer and whispered hotly in her ear. "I thought it had passed, but no. I want you so much. You're still beautiful. Beautiful and free." Jennifer's head was spinning. She tried to pull away, but it only made her more attracted to him. "I want you too," she said tonelessly. "Do I have a favor to ask?" Mike pulled away. Jennifer opened her mouth, but he exclaimed, "No, don't say anything yet. I have an idea. Let's play boss and secretary." He lifted her off the couch and dragged her to the middle of the office. "I am the formidable boss. Are you afraid of me? Tell me what you want. Could you give me a raise?" Jennifer said timidly, not believing this game. "What? I can't hear you." "Louder, raise my salary." She repeated a little more clearly. "But is that any way to talk to the boss? You address him as you beg him, and then you do whatever he says." A doubt stirred in Jennifer's soul. She froze. "Well, what about you?" Mike grinned. "It's just a game. Let's give it a try. Come on, express your desire. Give me a raise." "Boss," Jennifer said loudly. "But don't order it. You have to beg for it. See what the boss said? Take your skirt down. You're a subordinate, so take it off. Not like that. More erotic. How do you do it? You need me to do your bidding. So follow my instructions." Jennifer began to slowly remove her skirt, entering the game. "Dear boss, please give me a raise." "Why is that? Me and my son Archie will soon have nothing to eat." "But any favor requires a return favor. You understand, don't you? And I'm prepared to do you one. Just please give me a raise." Jennifer was so into the role that a tear rolled down her cheek. She realized that she really wanted to cry and tell Mike everything she had been through since he left. After these thoughts, tears came to her eyes from weakness or self-pity. Mike couldn't take it anymore and ran up to the half-naked girl. He was so aroused that he easily entered her and poured all the accumulated passion, standing on the carpet. Then he picked her up in his arms and carried her to the couch. They enjoyed each other's intimacy for a few more minutes. Soon the man stood up. "Time for work," he smiled at Jennifer. She nodded and began to clean herself up. All week her soul had been singing from her newfound love. Jacob noticed her mood. "Are you in love by any chance, Jennifer?" "Why are you suddenly asking that?" "It's just that I've never seen you in such a beautiful mood before. It's like you're glowing from the inside out." "No, Jacob, I didn't tell him my secrets. It's just that life is getting better, little by little. Whatever it is, I'm infinitely happy for you. I hope there will be room in this life for me as your old acquaintance." "Undoubtedly. But just don't emphasize the word old," Jennifer smiled. "You have a fine age. If I had been told that before I met you, I would probably have started to refute the fact. However, a lot has changed since then." He winked enigmatically at his ward's mother. The next week, the meeting in the office was repeated, and so did the game. Although it didn't feel so new, Jennifer was more in character now, and her closeness to Mike was back on her mind. 2 weeks later, her boss left on a business trip, and Jennifer waited impatiently for his return until payday. Then she received money even less than usual. The girl came to the accounting department with a question. Mike was the one who told everyone to cut off their overtime pay, she was told. Everyone, all of them, the girls nodded. Jennifer was upset, but decided to wait until Mike arrived to clear the air. When the two of them were alone in the office again, She didn't get flirtatious and joined in the game. I got a very small paycheck here. The girls in accounting said it was your order. Yes, I told them to remove overtime pay for all employees. You work here, so that means it affects you too. But why is it your fault that you don't get everything done on time? Why should the company's money go to that? Mike, but I told you. I don't have enough money to live alone with Sandy. Right now the paycheck is below the market average. Didn't you promise me you'd give me a raise? I promised when here we are, the two of us together here when we were playing and loving each other. It's just a game. Well, you just said yourself that we were playing. Who said it was serious? But even so, haven't you realized that your son Archie and I need money? Everyone needs money. As the CFO, I know that for a fact. For that matter, you asked for it. But I didn't promise anything. I also said, do what the boss says, quid pro quo. That's the rules of the game, which we both enjoyed, by the way. That's me, isn't it? I could see you wanted me too. I made you feel good. And we live by very different rules. So you just used me, and in doing so, you cheated on me. But you used my body too. Or did you do it for money? Here's the raise I supposedly promised you. Jennifer placed the resignation letter in front of him. Sign it, she demanded. You're talking to your boss in an inappropriate tone. You're not my boss anymore, so sign the letter and I'll quit, Jennifer insisted. Mike got up from his desk, walked over and closed the door again. If you keep harassing me, I'll file a rape report with the police. Well, why be so rude? I mean, we know each other well. We even have a son. You should have thought of your son when you signed the payroll. I'm doing this for the company, not for my own personal interests. That's why I'm leaving, so you don't confuse the two, Jennifer said. What about me? Aren't you going to find yourself another fool? Don't you realize I'm having a good time with you? And I think you are too, Mike objected. It was good, but it's gone. You can't fool me indefinitely, Jennifer said. Ugh, what a word, deceive. I didn't fool anyone. You're the one who made it up. Both my promises and my deceptions, Mike objected. Are you going to sign a letter of resignation? Well, if you want to quit, sure. But why don't you take a look at this first? He pointed to his screen. And what's this I'm going to see? Are you going to promote me after all? Flashed through her mind. Why don't you take a look? Jennifer walked over to the chair and looked at the monitor. At that moment, Mike started up the video files. They showed Jennifer herself evolving in the center of the office, on the carpet, as if to music, almost like a professional dancer. She watched in horror as she removed all her clothes and underwear from below her waist, then stretched her arms toward Mike, who approached her, as if reluctantly, with his face distorted beyond recognition. Her face can be seen clearly, alas, not just her face. It's impossible to tell from the man who it is. You sneaky bastard, so you were also filming us. From where? Jennifer exclaimed. What are you talking about? It's just CCTV cameras. They're in every office. You have to take and sign an order from the CEO and then take the footage. You can do whatever you want with them. Jennifer lowered her eyes. There are plenty of programs for processing video files. Say, that worked out well, didn't it? Didn't you ever want to be an actress? All girls usually want to, and a lot of guys too. You definitely have talent, Mike said. And what do you think your new employer will say when he sees this? I won't tell you where you'll be working. Trust me, it's not hard to find out at all. You could put it on the internet and you'd be a porn celebrity. That's not a bad prospect either. Then every man in town will recognize you and make lewd propositions. So are you going to sign the application, or are you going to stay after all? When it's just me watching this movie. It's one of my favorites, by the way. I've memorized all your little gestures from it, Mike continued. You want me and Archie to starve to death on the street. How can you think that about me? I'm just calculating all the options so you can't disappear from my sight. And what are we going to live on? Well, you've lived somehow before, so you'll continue to do so. So how about a statement? Jennifer grabbed a paper off her desk with anger, tore it up and threw it in Mike's face. Then she walked out of the office and slammed the door loudly, then left the office for a nearby cafe and, locking herself in the bathroom, cried for a long time from her own powerlessness and anger at herself for being so deceived. After a while, Bob walked into the cafe. Hi, sorry to be so abrupt, but do you know what happened to our Jennifer? Hello, Bob. No, what happened? She was so cheerful. And then she's abruptly withdrawn, walking around moody. And there's only food in the house for Archie. I haven't seen her in a long time. Is she sick? After that walk with Archie, Bob and Emily exchanged phone numbers. The man tried not to be annoying, but sometimes called for the most unexpected reasons. For example, when he learned delicious and quick recipes for cooking potatoes, he thought that Emily didn't like to cook either. And here's 15 minutes in the microwave and such a delicious meal, finger-licking good. Or he shared news from the publishing industry, which his younger brother regularly supplied him with. Alex told me that Shaposhnikov has a new book out. It is already planned to screen. Not interested in his work. Emily, in turn, also shared with him discoveries made on excursions or simply in her now quiet new life. And when the weather was nice, they would also meet in the park, walking and smiling at each other when they were called grandparents, and then laughing contagiously while sitting on a bench. Well, of course, if Archie calls me grandpa, then I'm grandpa to everyone. Not being grandpa would be bad, Bob said one day. How's that? Emily didn't understand. It's very simple, isn't it? I'd be a grandfather if he called me grandpa. But Archie calls grandfather that word, according to the rules of the Russian language, would be in the genitive case. Who? Grandfather. Forgive my nerdiness. Anyway, if I'm a grandfather, or even a grandfather, then since you're walking with me, you're a grandmother. I called the girls I know at my old job and found out they'd gotten a pay cut. Maybe that's why Jennifer is so upset. She just doesn't have enough money. I've told her how many times she can stop paying me, but she adamantly refuses to listen to me. Jennifer tried to refuse Emily when she called to say she was going to visit. The girl was ashamed to invite to her practically beggar's house, but the woman had insisted, and Bob had also said more than once that it would be good to meet and sit together. With the last money she had saved, Jennifer tearfully bought tea and rusks and prepared for the guests.
Bob and Emily came in together.
Can you believe it, Jennifer? We met at the front door. Here to help carry the bags, Bob said. They started taking chicken and canned goods, jam and cakes out of the bags. I'm sorry, Jennifer said to the guest. I didn't have time to cook it all, so I ran to the store and bought a few little things. Well, Emily, it looks to me like you bought the whole store in small change. What are we going to do with all this? Or are you going to live with me now? Jennifer smiled and looked at Jacob. I wonder why that idea never occurred to me before. Me neither, he said, surprised. Jennifer, I was just talking to my girls over tea, the former colleague said. They claim that the new boss has removed overtime. Yes, the girl nodded sadly. He says it's our own fault for not getting everything done during working hours. So the company doesn't have to pay us extra. I'm sorry, but I know your salary, Emily said. How are you going to live now? Maybe it's time to change jobs. Jennifer couldn't explain to Good, albeit Good, strangers how her father had naively caught her on the hook, and that now she couldn't change jobs. I tried, she lied, but I couldn't find anything suitable. So I thought you might need help, Emily continued. So I talked to some people I know. There are at least 2 places that will hire you at 1.5 times your salary. Maybe you could try interviewing there. Jennifer realized that it was impossible to refuse, so she nodded. Yes, of course, I'll definitely go. Thank you for your concern. Mike realized the power he now had over his subordinate and began to invite her into the office and tried to harass her there. If you are not with me, the video will be seen by everyone, he reminded the girl every time. So far, Jennifer had managed to come up with good reasons for refusal, whether it was an illness or an important meeting. But she was well aware that soon all these excuses would cease to work. And even if he started raping her, Jennifer would have nothing to defend herself with. That upset her even more. The girl felt like she was being sucked into a swamp she couldn't get out of. But she was already so tired of this tension that she was ready to wave her hand and give up. Then Ben showed up after hours. He usually came once or twice a month, spending some time with Jennifer, Archie, and Jacob. If he was on site, sometimes the 4 of them would all go for a walk and Ben would leave. This time he arrived late at night after work when Jacob was gone. Archie was asleep, and Jennifer was lying on the couch watching some channel on the TV, thinking about something of her own. Ben entered the apartment so quietly that Jennifer found him when he was already standing in the room. Oh, hi, she smiled. Did something happen? Yes, the man nodded. We need to talk. Let's go to the kitchen. When they sat down at the table, he continued. Jacob came to see me. He gave me a long explanation about Emily, about the empty refrigerator, about your paycheck being cut. All I got out of it was that for some reason you wouldn't leave this job, even though you had other good offers. I'm not retracting what I said about helping you, but I still want to ask why. Is it your desire to sit on the neck of others, or is there some other reason? And abruptly patience burst, and Jennifer nodded. There are. But when am I going to tell you about them? I can't. It would be like I'm putting my problems on you again. And besides, I'm really embarrassed. Ashamed of what? My behavior, my naivety, the fact that I'm using you and Jacob. Even though I know exactly how bad it is and that it's wrong. So you feel guilty. And that's why you refuse to tell me everything.
Jennifer nodded again.
Then imagine that tomorrow Jacob and I were gone. You'd be alone with your secret. What would you do? I don't know. I'd throw myself in front of a train, she said sadly. So you're ready to give up your life, but you're not ready to share it with me. Jennifer sighed and said softly, I'm being blackmailed. Ben was questioningly silent. If he had asked clarifying questions or inquired, the girl would probably have withdrawn. But he remained silent and looked expectantly at Jennifer. My new boss. Jennifer closed her eyes and said in a muffled voice, He's Archie's father. Ben had 1,000 questions. How can you blackmail the mother of your child when you don't live with them and haven't even acknowledged your son? But he restrained himself and continued to remain silent. Jennifer sighed and began to tell. When he came, he summoned me, and we were together again. He was so attentive. Then he cut everyone's pay by canceling overtime. And when I wanted to quit, he showed me a video. Tears came out of the girl's eyes. He recorded everything. He had video surveillance. He hid himself, but I'm on it in great detail. He said he'd send it to his employer or put it on the website so everyone would know what I was like. How's Archie going to grow up with a mom like that? And he knows where we live. And I'm afraid that if I quit, he'll be watching me. He's cut my pay here, and he's always calling me to his office. He makes himself patient, he tries, but I still find reasons to refuse. This can't go on much longer. I'll either have to accept it, or... It's none of my business, but I want to understand why you want to be with him again, after he left you and your son Ben interrupted. I saw him for the first time in almost 2 years, and I realized I still loved him. He was all attentive, just like the first time. I thought he'd come back to us. There's nothing like that on any show. You should really get out of there and run for your life. I'm ready to, but I can't. Do you still love him? Jennifer looked up at Ben with tears in her eyes.
I hate him. I'd probably kill him. He disgusts me. I shake every time I hear his voice, and even when he calls me into the office.
So I take it you're willing to walk away if he stops threatening to release the video? Of course I lie awake nights thinking about how to do it, but I can't think of anything. It's either kill him or kill myself. Either way, Archie will be an orphan.
The girl cried again. I told you that you could come to me for help. Why didn't you do it right away?
I was fine at first. And when the tape came out, I'm ashamed, Ben. I mean, you're a stranger in this.
Did it ever occur to you that blackmail is a felony? I mean, you can punish him yourself, threaten him with the police, after all.
Jennifer tried to explain herself. She said that Mike had threatened to spread the videotape and then she'd get good lawyers. She's still going to lose, the scoundrel. Okay, let's see who else loses. Sandy's advice was to go to the clinic on Monday and take a sick day. But that meant less income. But it'll get your nerves back in order. Yes, it's difficult, but you can't say no at this time. Jennifer had a question. Out of what funds was Sandy paying God's mom? Jennifer took out a loan. How would she pay it back? Jennifer shrugged her shoulders. She doesn't. She doesn't have the means to pay it back. If she loses her job, she won't lose anything. But if she changes jobs, how? That's something to think about. When Jennifer went on sick leave, she realized that Ben was right about one thing. She was much calmer. She was out of the circle of constant unpleasant thoughts. The girl was listed in the company, but she was protected from Mike's attacks and threats, and she still didn't know what she would do next. Right now she had a break, and it was helping Jennifer recover a little. On Saturday, Ben, Jacob, and Emily showed up on the doorstep of Jennifer's apartment. Jennifer, Get Archie ready to go for a walk, Jacob ordered. Emily will go to the park with him, and they will stay behind. They have much to discuss. Without raising her eyes, the girl dressed her son and handed him over to the care of her former co-worker. As the door closed behind them and everyone else made their way to the kitchen, Ben said, "I'm sorry, but I had to tell Jacob something. We can't do this without his help." "Don't worry, girl, I brought more scoundrels to light," the older man said. "I've been investigating for over 20 years for a reason." Jennifer looked at Jacob. "You? Yeah, didn't you know? I thought you were ex-military."
"There are no exes like me," he smiled. "Now let's discuss our actions."
The same day Jennifer returned from her sick leave, she got a call from Mike. "Please come into my office in an hour."
"Okay, Mike. I'll come over," the girl said so that those around her could hear her.
She sorted out the files left over from her absence. Then she wrote an email, replied in Messenger, and then took the first folder she could find and walked with a businesslike stride to her boss's office. Knocked on the office, heard a loud come in and opened the door. Come in, Mike," as usual, got up from his seat and went to lock the door behind the girl. She turned around and watched intently while he did so. "I brought you some," she began. The man pointed to the nightstand. "You can pick it up later." "Where have you been for so long? I missed you so much." He began to come closer and closer. Jennifer could barely contain the unpleasant shiver. Finally, his hands touched her clothes. He left the jacket in place, ran his hands lower down her stomach to her skirt. "You dressed like that for me today. Do you want what I want?" The girl remained silent, and Mike took it as agreement. When he was about to unzip her skirt, Jennifer suddenly said in a harsh voice, "Don't do that. I don't want to." "Well, what do you want, you silly girl? After all, I can see it. I want you." "No, you're wrong. I'm asking you to let me go and sign my resignation letter." Mike recoiled sharply from her. "What? Or is my memory gone? I still have the video on my desktop. 2 clicks of the mouse and everyone around here will know what you're like." "I'm not." "Yeah, but only I know that, and I'm not going to tell anyone. I can keep a secret. Especially when there's an obedient girl around. Come on, don't be stubborn. We'll be good together." And he reached for her again. "Sign the application. And then you'll be undressing already." "Are you serious? You think that's going to stop me?" "I'm serious, Mike. There's my statement on the nightstand. Sign it and then do what you want." "What if I want you?" "I said you want me." Then it was a deal. Mike took the paper, put his sprawling signature on it, and put it back. "But you'll only go to the nightstand through me and what I want," he said. "And when you and I are done and you leave your workplace, I will, as I said before, send the video to all interested parties. That will guarantee that when I come to visit you and your son, you won't kick me out. Why is that? Because I'll be the only person who knows the truth about you. Everyone else will turn away, and then you'll belong to me. Isn't it enough that I'm with you now? Why send out more videos?" Jennifer asked. "Just once?" "No, of course not. I want you to be with me as long as I want you to be with me, and only with me, so no one else will ever come near you. But you have a way out in a statement, just like last time. And no one but you and me will know about the existence of this erotic masterpiece." Saying this, Mike walked over to the girl and started undressing her. Jennifer didn't move and thought, but suddenly a siren sounded and the internal radio came to life. "Attention. Fire alarm. Evacuation. Everyone, evacuate the building immediately. Please do not use elevators, take the stairs. Attention. Fire alarm." What the hell? Mike swore, looking at the radio. "I thought it wasn't working." "Thank God it does," Jennifer smiled inwardly. "That's what I thought." There was a knock on the office door. Mike out. "There's a fire." Jennifer began to quickly pull up her skirt, which Mike had managed to unbutton. He grabbed his briefcase and ran to the door, opened it, and sprinted out of the office. Jennifer calmly went to the nightstand, picked up the application, and also, without hurry, went away. The play is over, she thought as she walked down the stairs with everyone else. While the firemen were inspecting the building and allowing everyone to return to their workplaces, Jennifer stealthily got into Ben's car, which was parked around the corner, and drove to the police station. There she wrote a statement, attached evidence, and returned to the office. 2 hours afterward, a police car pulled up to the building. 3 officers got out, showed their documents, and went up to the floor where the CFO's office was located. There they showed them, but he's not here right now. It doesn't matter to us, replied one of the policemen. What's the matter? The CEO approached as the uniformed men were taking the system unit out of Mike's office. Don't interfere with the investigation. One of them pushed him away with his hand. But there are trade secret documents in there. I sympathize. Are you interfering with the work of the police right now? The director backed off. No, I just wanted to understand what happened. The mystery of the investigation. Perhaps your employee will tell you. He's not back yet. All the worse for him. After lunch, Jennifer took her boss's signed application to HR. Mike apologized profusely for losing it in the paperwork. But here it is, signed 2 weeks ago. So have my paperwork ready starting tomorrow. I don't work here. We won't have time for that, the HR girl said. But it's not my problem. Make a note in the employment record. I can't give it to you. Send an order to the accounting department so that they made the calculation. I'll come back for the rest later. I've got some paperwork to get to my new job. Before leaving, Jennifer once again looked in the personnel department, took her documents, and with a victorious smile left the office. My girl, you're just a born actress, were the words that greeted Jennifer Jacob when she got home from work. I've seen the video. There's no doubt about blackmail, harassment, and a couple of other questionable actions. And if they can find something on the computer for the Economic Crimes Unit to pick on, this scumbag won't have a care in the world to get his ass out of the shit she's in. Thank you. Such a great hidden camera on your jacket lapel and good quality recording. The girl smiled at him. Of course, it's a little illegal. Jacob sighed. But my former subordinates won't cling to such trivialities either. When Ben told Jacob about Jennifer's situation, he was indignant. Why didn't you tell me before? Who would do something like that right away? So much time had been wasted because of that. He got miniature recording devices hidden in a woman's brooch through former colleagues. He contacted the fire inspector on behalf of the investigation team and detailed a scenario for the main character. Jennifer, your #1 job is to report to me as soon as you go into the office. And task #2 is to stall for time without giving him a chance to jump you. Okay, I don't know how I'm going to do that. I want to tear him into 1,000 little pieces. I'm sure for your future, and more importantly Archie's future, you'll be able to contain yourself. Will you? Jennifer smiled. I'll try. The rest was a matter of technique, getting the fire alarms to go off, kicking everyone out of the building, arranging time with the investigator to take a statement and camera footage, sending a team to confiscate the computer. It took a little longer than planned. But by the end of the day, it was clear that Ben and Jacob had managed to get the girl out of the trap that love, trust, and perhaps her own stupidity had put her in. Jennifer got a job at one of the companies she was invited to on Emily's recommendation, and gradually began to come to her senses and pay off her loan debt. This is called Sophia Loren Amber led Jacob over to a dark maroon rose in her makeshift rose garden. I can see why the man smiled. So much dignity and beauty. Yes, the woman agreed. And the burrow is the same, requires more care than others. Let's go to the table. Well, did you take a walk in the garden? Emily looked at Jacob, smiling. Oh, and by the way, I was introduced to Sophia Loren. What did you say? I said she was beautiful, but my heart went out to another woman. I said she was beautiful, but my heart went out to another woman. I wonder who that is. You, my Amber, he concluded, hugging the woman. I see all the men at the grill are crazy about her. Emily laughed. At that moment, Archie ran up to Amber. Grandma Emily, let's go. Let's go where, dear? The child waved his hand uncertainly. The older woman took him by the hand, and the baby led her to the honeysuckle table, where Jennifer was gathering treats for the table. Golden boy. Jennifer, why did you keep him a secret for so long? I was afraid you wouldn't like the fact that I had a baby. After all, you only rented the apartment to me. No kids, no pets. Remember? I remember. And I'm not going back on my word. But I'm not so old that I don't realize that life moves on and changes will happen. Your Archie is like a grandson to me. I don't know if Ben will ever give me one of his. Amber looked at her son, who was grilling kebabs by the grill and talking to Alec. I asked to come, Jacob's brother explained. I wanted to see who you were buying the baby clothes for, but also his brave mother, of course, who wasn't afraid to take Jacob as her son's nanny. Don't you have a reason to change your plans now? Ben obediently began turning the kebabs. If I were a dozen years younger, he continued, I would definitely follow your charming mother. And if I were younger, then for the mom of this charming baby. I don't see what you have to lose. Ben lifted his head, looked at Jennifer and waved back at her. The girl sent him an air kiss. He traced the gestures with his eyes and sighed. Well, that just leaves your mom. She'll go for milk and will throw her stuff away. Margaret accidentally overhears her daughter-in-law talking to her son. Margaret was born and raised in a rural family. Her mother worked on the farm all her life. Her father worked as a driver. Margaret and her little sister Vanessa cleaned the house, cooked and looked after the livestock from a young age. Their parents had no time for work. They earned money. In the evening they would come home tired and their daughters would look after them. They would set the table, pour tea, and bring clean towels after washing. It was the order of the day. From childhood, Margaret dreamed of becoming a teacher. Perhaps her first teacher played a big role in this. She was a beautiful, very intelligent young girl who had barely graduated from the institute. She spoke intelligently and calmly, knew the answers to all the questions and skillfully motivated the class for successful study. She had no laggards. Even the weakest tried and stretched to please. Gwen. Margaret remembered how she had sobbed when her favorite teacher's practice was over and she had gone home. And she hadn't been the only one upset then. Ever since then, the girl had been determined that when she grew up she would become a teacher. As good and kind as Gwen. Margaret never changed her mind. She studied well and, having finished school, easily entered the university. Margaret was given a room in a dormitory. It was so unusual. The girl had never been away from her parents and sister for more than a couple of days. And now all of a sudden it was like this. It was scary and hard at first. But Margaret was quickly drawn in. She liked her studies, her classmates, her teachers. She realized more and more clearly that she had chosen the right path. Being a teacher was really her calling. After receiving her diploma, Margaret got her first job in her life. She was hired at the local city school and at a prestigious language gymnasium. And they offered her a salary that the young girl could never have dreamed of. Margaret plunged headlong into her work. She liked everything to teach, to answer the numerous questions of her children, to write notes for lessons, and to deal with interesting and difficult cases at the pedagogical council. The young specialist was noticed and appreciated. It was nice to receive compliments from experienced colleagues. Margaret felt really happy. Vanessa, her sister, had also moved to the city. Graduated from the College of Economics, got a job at the meat processing plant in the administrative office. Even got married, and very successfully. Ashley, the son of the director of the plant, fell in love with the young, pretty employee. The guy was from a wealthy family, handsome, educated, witty. Perhaps his parents were at first against the bride from the village, but after getting to know Vanessa better, they loved and accepted her. Of course they did. Beautiful, hard-working, faithful, kind. The young lived in their own flat, which had 3 spacious rooms and a huge loggia. Ashley's parents had given it to them as a wedding present. Margaret was genuinely happy for her sister. But her personal life wasn't going well. Back in her university days, Margaret had had several unsuccessful romances. They all followed the same pattern. At first, the girl began to charm the next suitor, saw him as an ideal man, mentally preparing for the wedding. Then came the epiphany, bringing heartache and almost disgust to the one who had recently been the meaning of Margaret's life. Somehow her suitors turned out to be infantile, spoiled creatures, selfish as well. Insecure, weak. No, Margaret could not commit her life to such a man. The bitterness and disappointment after each breakup was long-lasting. That's why Margaret decided to take a break. I don't care about those men. They're so frustrating. Better to get on with her career. And then, one day he came into the life of a young teacher. Andrew, a modest, even a little stiff and short guy with blue eyes and a nice smile. For the first time, they saw each other in the school gym on the eve of 1st September. Andrew was leading a team of craftsmen who were hurriedly completing repairs at the school. The young men met their eyes. Margaret immediately realized that this man had something for her. She couldn't quite put her finger on it. He wasn't that handsome. Quiet, unremarkable. And he flushed to the roots of his hair at the sight of Margaret and turned away, embarrassed. It seemed very sweet and touching. Margaret realized that he liked her too at first sight. Then Margaret met Andrew every day, and he invariably hid his eyes from her. But the girl began to notice that the guy secretly looks at her when he thinks that she does not see it, and it was very pleasant and exciting. And one day Andrew suddenly gathered courage. It was on the eve of the site handover. One last chance to get to know each other. Job done. Andrew has nothing more to do at the school, so he'd never see Margaret again. So the boy took a desperate and difficult step. Andrew spoke quietly and simply, no florid phrases. But his speech was so sincere, so touching. Margaret, of course, melted and agreed to go out with the guy. Andrew had no idea that she had been waiting for this invitation for a long time and was beginning to worry that she would never get it. And then what to do? She wouldn't be the one to hang around his neck, would she? Andrew invited Margaret to the cinema. The girl was not worried before the first date. She saw that she liked Andrew very much, felt the warmth emanating from him, and therefore was sure that their meeting would go as it should. If only Andrew would relax a little, because he was very shy. After that first date, Margaret realized that Andrew was completely her person. They were so good, so easy together. Both told each other about their lives and destinies. Andrew was raised by his grandmother. His parents died when the boy was only 6 years old. So there he was left with his paternal grandmother, already a very elderly woman. She was an old-school lady and believed that children should be brought up in strictness, especially boys. So Andrew's childhood could not be called happy, warm, and carefree. No, the boy didn't complain. He just told me how he grew up and grew up. It was Margaret, sensitive and attentive Margaret. She was drawing her own conclusions. She felt sorry for this wonderful boy. She wanted to hug him, to kiss him, to give him some warmth and care. After all this he lacked so much in childhood. Andrew went into the army after high school. Then he came back, trained as a welder. However, he failed to find a job in his profession, but he became a foreman of a repair team. Not an easy job either. Still, the boy never gave up hope of becoming a welder. And wages there are higher, and in general. He'd learned so much for a reason. Andrew lived in a rented flat, just like Margaret. When he was just a kid, some clever relatives had sold his parents' house. There was no end in sight, so the lad had to start from scratch. But he was not discouraged and did not complain about life, although fate entreated him rather unfairly. Andrew was very kind and caring, unlike Margaret's previous beau. He always asked if she was hungry, and on chilly evenings he threw his jacket over her shoulders to keep her warm. With Andrew, the girl felt loved and desired. It seemed that he was ready to do anything for her. It was a wonderful feeling. Margaret realized that she was in love. And the feeling was completely mutual. There was no doubt about it. Andrew looked at her with such eyes and tried so hard to make her feel good around him. It was impossible not to notice. Margaret wasn't surprised when Andrew proposed to her and happily accepted. She had long wanted to live next to Andrew in the same flat, to take care of each other, to support each other, and it was more fun together. Margaret was tired of returning to an empty, cold room. Vanessa at first was not delighted with her sister's choice. "You're young, you're pretty, you could easily find someone richer. My Ashley has so many friends. They're all handsome and the sons of rich parents. Are you going to roll around with them like a cheese and butter?" Vanessa asked. "What about Andrew? Never a decent job or prospects." But after getting to know Andrew better, Vanessa changed her mind. "He's a good man," smiled her sister, sharing her impressions with Margaret. "Very kind, and he loves you very much. Everything will be fine with you. You will achieve everything together. You can't miss a man like that. I'm so happy for you. Andrew and Margaret got married. They lived in his rented flat, and Margaret's golden years began. The young husband tried to help his wife in every way. He did a lot of things for her, and even as he had once dreamed, found a new job, got a job as a welder at a construction site. He took part-time jobs, did not refuse the opportunity to earn money, as he was saving for his own flat. Andrew dreamed of buying a 2-bedroom flat in a prestigious neighborhood with many good schools and playgrounds, so that his and Margaret's future children would have a happy childhood. Andrew often made surprises to his young wife. He would give her a ring, or just come home with a bouquet. Margaret felt the happiest in the world and thanked fate for such a loving and caring husband. The young couple spent hours talking about everything in the world, discussing films, stories from the lives of friends or relatives, making plans. Sometimes they argued, but always found a compromise. They liked the same films and books. Both discovered something new and interesting to each other. For example, with Andrew, Margaret became interested in hiking in the woods, and Andrew, thanks to his young wife, fell in love with the theater. Margaret was sure that she and Andrew were soulmates, halves of the same whole. Even though the couple lived poorly, they had enough to live on. Both did not seek excesses like a luxury car or annual trips to the sea. But they were happy to have each other, and often remembered that chance meeting at school, which might not have been. Margaret took a holiday in August, as her bosses had suggested, and then Oliver was born. How happy the young couple had been over his arrival. The new father glowed with pride as he held his son in his arms for the first time. Andrew turned out to be a wonderful parent, attentive, sensitive, caring. He could drive around for hours after work with a pram to give his young wife a rest. But Margaret most often went for a walk with her husband. It was so pleasant to walk together with Andrew, holding the handle of the pram and talking to the man she loved about everything in the world in a low voice, so as not to wake her son. The young parents liked to make plans for the future. They still did not have their own flat, but the amount in the bank account was slowly but surely growing. Just a little more, and the couple would be able to afford to buy their own place. At the same time, Vanessa, Margaret's sister, had a daughter, Ellie. The young mothers often visited each other and learned together the wisdom of caring for babies. The sisters shared advice and discussed the successes and failures of their babies. Margaret felt truly happy, and her husband was so loving and understanding. And her sister was close by. The young couple often dreamed about how their son would grow up. Surely he will be clever, kind, brave, will become, perhaps, a scientist or a craftsman. And they, the parents, will try to ensure that the innate talents of their child to open up and gain strength. It is only necessary to be attentive and patient. Andrew planned to do a lot with his son, to support him, always be there for him. In a difficult moment, Margaret was happy about it. On the soul was easy and calm. The two of them would manage. The child will grow up a good man. But the dreams of the couple were not destined to come true. A few years after the birth of their son, misfortunes one after another fell on their small family. First came the financial crisis, as a result of which the couple's savings depreciated. They were only a short time away from buying their own flat. The goal was so close. But after what had happened, the money accumulated in the account could only buy a couple of winter jackets, and that only if they were very lucky. Oliver had already started kindergarten. Margaret was out of maternity leave. The couple had a hard time getting over what had happened, even crying. Andrew couldn't help crying either. He thought that his wife did not see, but she noticed everything. The man even looked for a flat, the one he had dreamed of for a long time. A spacious 2-bedroom apartment not far from a large school and a sports center where Oliver could go swimming. And then it was a blow. But there was no time for despondency. Times were tough. Margaret's salary at the school had been delayed for months. Things were not going well at the building site either. Andrew's main income was now part-time work. The man spent all day long on them to feed his family. As time went on, Oliver grew up and it was time for him to go to first grade. The family seemed to be adjusting to the new conditions. Andrew's part-time job kept them afloat. The man was making plans for his own flat again. There were hopes for a better life, glimmered ahead of a happy future. Then tragedy struck at the construction site. Andrew was moonlighting. The owners of the site were economizing on everything and didn't care much about safety. Andrew knew he was taking a risk, but he was always careful and acted as carefully as possible. But this time, during the construction of a supermarket building, a man fell from the 3rd floor directly onto the concrete blocks piled up below. Of course, Andrew didn't survive. The paramedics who arrived could only pronounce him dead. Margaret wasn't told the terrible news until the morning. For her, the whole world turned upside down and faded away. She could not even cry for a long time. The woman felt her heart and soul literally torn in two. It didn't feel like living. How and why get up in the morning, if there is now no nearest and dearest person? Margaret realized that she would never meet anyone like Andrew again. There was no one else like him. And she didn't need anyone else. She missed his smile, his look, his smell, his warmth. Physically, it was painful from the impossibility to embrace the person she loved. There were his things around: clothes, books, glasses. But Andrew himself would never come home again, hug her and her son, joke with them. How to accept that? To dull the pain. Margaret even took up the bottle. Margaret realized, of course, that this was a dead end. But at that moment, she didn't care, just as long as she could get rid of the unbearable pain for a moment. There was no telling what would have happened to the woman if it hadn't been for Vanessa. She took Oliver in for a while. She had seen that his mother was not only unable to look after the child, but couldn't even manage herself. Margaret didn't care. Oliver was taken away, and that was fine. She didn't even think about her own child's feelings, but he was in pain and scared too. What brought Margaret back to life, oddly enough, was Oliver's illness. He caught pneumonia and ended up in hospital. Vanessa came to her sister in tears to tell her what had happened. She felt guilty. She had not looked after her nephew. He had a high fever and was delirious, Vanessa said. At first the doctor and I thought it was stress. His father had died and his mother was in a strange state. But then it became obvious it was more serious than that. He was in intensive care for 24 hours. He seems better now. But the doctor says it's too early to relax. Are you drinking? It's time to get my life back. Enough already, we can't bring Andrew back. We're going to lose another boy. The situation brought Margaret back to life. She was scared for her son, more scared than she'd ever been in her life. She pulled herself together, stopped drinking, regained her job, and of course became a caring and loving mother again. Every day Margaret now traveled to see her son in hospital. At first she stood under the windows, and then when Oliver was allowed to leave, she walked with him for hours in the hospital courtyard. Oliver somehow grew up at once. Trouble had turned the 7-year-old boy into a little old man with sad eyes. He was surprisingly thin, pale, and silent. Looking at her son, Margaret realized that he was under deep stress. Her baby is traumatized and needs a strong mother. And she, Margaret, had given up, drowning in her own grief, forgetting about the person who needed her support. From then on, Margaret became the perfect mother, attentive, fully focused on her son, caring. Margaret could not stay in the city. The rent was too expensive. The woman did not earn so much. She had to return to the village. Her father was gone. His life was taken by a heart attack 2 years earlier. And her mother, the elderly Maggie, was in great need of support and care. It was getting hard for her to manage the household on her own. So Margaret's move came at a good time. Oliver went to first grade at the village school. Margaret took a job as a teacher. But soon she had to think about changing jobs. The salaries at the school were very different from those at the city grammar school. It was impossible to live on such crumbs, and Margaret had to pull the child alone to put him on his feet. A neighbor, Aunt Gray, had a good idea. Her nephew had a shop in the central market. He sold clothes, shoes, accessories. He needed a salesman, someone decent, someone he could trust. His nephew promised Aunt Margaret a good salary, Aunt Nura said. He also offered a percentage of the proceeds. Margaret was also quite happy with the 2x2 schedule. It was hard, of course, to part with her dream job. After all, teaching kids is Margaret's true calling. The woman knew from childhood what she wanted to be. But what can you do when times are so hard? She and Oliver need something to eat. What wouldn't you do for a child? It was with great regret that Margaret left school. She missed her pupils, her colleagues, and her school life for a long time. Her heart sank every time she saw children dressed in uniform on the street. But new realities awaited Margaret. Working in the market was not easy. Capricious customers who didn't know what they wanted. Scandalous traders, competitors, the material responsibilities, and traveling took up a lot of time and energy. On days when Margaret went to work, she had to get up at the crack of dawn and walk almost 2 kilometers to the nearest bus stop in town. but the pay was good. Now Margaret could buy her son beautiful clothes and toys, and even every summer they flew to the seaside resort, and her mother helped to look after her son. She was already very old, of course, but she had enough time and energy for her grandson. Margaret often went to visit Vanessa. She didn't work, she was busy with the house and her daughter. She could afford it. Her husband earned enough to provide for the family. That's how your fate turned out. Vanessa often pitied her sister. You work as hard as you can, spinning as hard as you can. I even feel embarrassed to be a housewife. What about you? Everyone has their own fate, Margaret sighed. I'm not complaining about mine. Oliver and I have everything. There's no need to worry about it. Margaret was genuinely happy about Vanessa's life. She adored both her sister and her niece Ellie, but as her own daughter. The four of them often went out together, traveled somewhere together. In general, they lived friendly soul to soul. It was Vanessa who advised Margaret to save up some money and invest it in shares of a large company. Ashley says it's the right thing to do, Vanessa said. We have a lot of money invested in those stocks ourselves. My husband is sure that everything will be great in the end. And Ashley's smart, he knows. Margaret listened to her sister and, without a word to anyone, bought a few shares. The capital was growing, but very slowly. It was impossible to get rich by such interest, as it seemed at first. But Margaret decided to let the money lie on deposit. But she did not tell her son or her mother about the shares. I don't think they'll approve, Margaret thought. They would say it was a waste of money. Let the family live in peace. So Margaret had her own little secret. Now she was saving money, buying shares, saving for a happy future for her son. Oliver grew up to be a smart, athletic boy, unlike his modest, quiet father. He was the soul of the company. He always had a lot of friends, comrades. The guy walked a lot, laughed, socialized. He was a very cheerful and carefree person. What a lad he's grown up to be. Margaret rejoiced. Self-confident, brave, intelligent. Just the kind of son Andrew and I imagined when we walked round the neighborhood with the pram. Oliver dreamed of becoming a lawyer, but to enter the coveted faculty he lacked just a little bit. The guy had to go to the army. Returning, he decided to try his luck in the city. His mother supported her son's decision and even helped financially by renting Oliver a flat. Go, try, dare, she said. Just be careful and know that no matter what happens, you can always come home, here, in this house. Thank you, Oliver smiled. But I'm not going back. I'm going to make my way in the city. There are so many opportunities there, so many prospects. Something will come of it. Bon voyage. Margaret smiled. It was scary to let her son go, but what can you do? The boy has grown up. It was time for him to start his own life. Oliver entered a construction college and at the same time got a job at the factory. He studied, worked, and paid his own rent. Often came to the village to visit his mother and grandmother Gwen. He always turned up with gifts and funny stories. Margaret's mother had given up on him. She hardly ever left the house, and sometimes she didn't even recognize her own daughters. One day she had a heart attack. Margaret called an ambulance. Mum was taken to hospital. The old woman never came back. What do you want? Age. The doctor sighed tiredly. Nobody lives forever. Margaret and Vanessa organized a funeral in the village. There were a lot of people at the wake. Everyone knew Mum here, after all. And then Vanessa told her sister to take over her parents' house. I don't want half the inheritance, Vanessa said. I don't need it, you know. What about you? Have you looked after Mum these last few years? It's hard work, so it's only fair that you get the house. Margaret didn't mind. She really needed her own corner. Old age was fast approaching. The woman sometimes marveled at how quickly her life had flown by. It seemed as if she and Andrew had just had Oliver. They were young, full of plans and hopes, beautiful. And now Oliver is a grown-up, independent man. Andrew is gone, and she's almost an old woman herself. What lies ahead? Margaret thought. Only retirement and a quiet, peaceful existence in a country cottage. Oliver is my only hope. He will marry, his grandchildren will be born, the little ones will come to visit their grandmother, and then there will be joy in life. By the way, Oliver is a good man, Margaret thought aloud. He hadn't given up his dream of going to law school. He got in after all. It was hard on him. working and studying, but he'll get through it. I'll be there to help and support him. Vanessa said it was time to live for yourself. You're young, you're still beautiful. Oliver's all grown up. Now you can treat yourself. You've got a good salary, you've got savings. Let's go to Italy or Greece. You've never been abroad before. We'll take a walk there, have a rest. What Greece, what Italy? Margaret smiled back. I have a grown-up son, Oliver, who is getting married soon. I guess I'll have to help him with the wedding and the flat. That's what I'm saving up for. No time for holidays. He's a grown man now, Vanessa persisted. He's so strong and handsome. He'll manage on his own, and you need to think about yourself sometimes. But Margaret didn't agree. It was different for her. Sister husband Ashley and son Harry were born into a wealthy family. Their futures were planned 100 years in advance and secured. True, Jen's niece, despite her rich parents, had grown up wise, modest, sensible. Simple, natural, pleasant. And independent, too. Like Oliver, Jen worked from an early age. A golden girl. When Margaret had argued with her sister that Oliver would need her support for the foreseeable future, she'd been right. Shortly after that conversation, the son came to visit his mother for the weekend. He was somehow mysterious, not as he always was. Margaret immediately realized that something was wrong. The woman quickly assembled the table, put out her son's favorite treats: fried potatoes with mushrooms, pancakes and pickles from the cellar. Then she watched with pleasure as Oliver devoured it all. At the table, the young man shared some exciting news with his parents. "Mom, I'm getting married," he said. "How are you getting married?" Margaret's questions poured out of Margaret like a cornucopia of questions. To whom? When? The woman was overwhelmed by a storm of emotions: joy, anxiety, surprise. "Her name is Julia," Oliver answered. "You're going to love her. I'll bring her here next weekend. You two should get to know each other before we get married. I just wanted to warn you." At first, Margaret nodded her head with a smile. She knew, of course, that the moment would come sooner or later, but still the news took her by surprise. Wow, Oliver's getting married, all grown up, she thought. Julia worked as a waitress in a cafe, her son said. "I often went there for a bite to eat. That's how we met." Julia is also from the country. She was also brought up by a single mother. See how much we have in common. Julia came to the city to go to law school. Another coincidence. That's amazing. She dreamed of working for the law, helping out, catching criminals. And she's so fragile, so thin. What kind of policeman would she be? She failed her college exams, but she didn't want to go back home to the village. Oliver continued. What would she do there? She grew up in a small village in the middle of nowhere, in a poor family. Her mother had 5 younger children besides her. Julia didn't want to go back to her old life. So she took a job as a waitress in a cafe. She got a room in a hostel, so she lived a little, worked a little. "How long have you two been together?" Margaret asked. 6 months. Almost Oliver smiled. Margaret knew from that smile that her son was in love. "She's a good girl, taking care of me. She cleans the house, she cooks. I mean, we've been living together for 4 months now, almost in my rented flat. The other day I proposed to her." "So that's it," Margaret said. "There's so much to prepare. To book a wedding hall, to find outfits for the bride and groom, to hire a presenter, to plan the menu, and to send out invitations." "Mom, we've decided we're going to do without all that," Oliver said simply. "We'll just do it quietly at the registry office, that's all." "As you wish," Margaret nodded. She'd painted a picture in her head of her only son's ideal wedding a long time ago. It was a joyous celebration, with a crowd of dressed-up guests, a ringing toastmaster, a huge cake, and a table bursting with treats. Decorated with balloons and ribbons, cars, dancing. A beautiful bride and a happy groom. But if the young people decided differently, so be it. After all, it's their holiday. The following weekend, Oliver came to his mother's house with the bride. Margaret did her best to prepare a sumptuous table. She made salads and meat. The appetizers on the plates could have made a poem, Margaret thought. She was very anxious to please her future daughter-in-law, to show Julia that she was welcome in the house. The guests were carefully prepared for their arrival. They were careful not to say the wrong thing, so that Oliver would not be ashamed of his mother. Julia was a thin girl of short stature, with large dark eyes, thin eyebrows, and thick fringes. She was dressed simply but tastefully in elegant dress, low-heeled shoes. At first the guests and the hostess felt a little uneasy. Julia, looking round carefully, was silent. Apparently she was too shy to say a word. Only after a while did Margaret realize that this modesty was feigned. Julia was just looking around, choosing a tactic of behavior, drawing conclusions. The atmosphere at the table was resolved by Oliver. He joked, amused his ladies, threw up interesting topics for conversation. Oliver was always so lively, energetic, companionable. During the conversation, it turned out that Julia was really from a very poor and disadvantaged family. The girl charmed Margaret at the first meeting with her modesty. Oliver's fiancée had a very sweet smile. And how did she look at her fiancé? Her eyes shone with tenderness and love. The boy, however, answered Julia in the same way. He held her hand, now and then hugged her around the waist. There was love and harmony between them. Margaret looked at them and her heart rejoiced. Oliver and Julia were married. Margaret suggested that the young people have a celebration in a cafe. Not a real wedding with a host and decorated cars, but a proper celebration with their friends. She'd even put up the money for it. Margaret had savings. Over the years, the woman had managed to put aside a certain amount. Plus the shares, bought on her sister's advice, had risen in value. At first, Margaret dreamed of buying a flat in the city. But then she realized that she could live quite well in the village. It was quiet, peaceful, and close to familiar and friendly people. Margaret liked the very atmosphere that reigned in her village. Towards retirement, the woman realized that she did not want to move anywhere, even though she had enough money to buy a small flat. Only Vanessa, her sister, knew about the savings. Margaret didn't talk about her wealth, not even to her son. She wanted Oliver to grow up independently, to try to earn his own money for a place to live and achieve something in life. But if he failed, his mother would always help him in a difficult situation. The means are there, but only for the time being. He wasn't supposed to know about it, to make his own way. The money was in a bank account. Margaret had invested some of it in shares a few years ago on the advice of her husband and sister, and the money was now earning a good income. And for her son's wedding, Margaret had withdrawn a sum that she estimated would be enough for a sumptuous celebration. Margaret wanted to give the young couple a gift. On her son's next visit, she handed Oliver a puffy envelope. Wow, he marveled as he looked inside. What a surprise. Where did you get it? I saved up, Margaret smiled. Make a holiday of it all you want. Go to a restaurant with your friends. Don't deny yourself anything. Have fun. Thank you, Oliver smiled. We'd better save that money for the flat. Why rent? You both make enough money. And a wedding is only once in a lifetime. Well, ideally, of course. I'm having trouble with my job, Oliver admitted. It's not paying much, and it's unstable out there. I could be out of the hospital. What about Julia? Doesn't she make enough money? They don't pay a waitress $1 million. It's all right, Margaret said, patting her grown-up son on the shoulder. He's all grown up, Oliver, and he's a big man himself. And his problems are just as grown-up financial matters, family maintenance. I feel sorry for him, of course, but we all go through it. Don't worry, son. You'll finish your studies and find a better job. You're my good boy. You're so smart, handsome, and educated. Everywhere with open arms will be accepted with open arms. Oliver sighed heavily. I was expelled. How? Margaret gasped. Why? For truancy? Oliver said quietly. I had to work a lot, so I didn't get to class. I had a lot of absences. I thought I'd make it, but I couldn't. So I got expelled. That's all right, Margaret said, pulling herself together. Oliver needed support now. It wasn't the first or the last to recover and finish his studies. I don't want to finish my studies. Oliver snapped at her. I'm a grown man. I'm just sitting in the classroom, wiping my trousers. It's funny. You have to earn money, not suffer with nonsense. Margaret didn't argue with her son. He was not in the right state to realize anything, and then she would change his mind. Education is necessary for a young man, otherwise you can't build a career. The woman will definitely convey this to her adult and only child. Now you need to support him, calm him down, encourage him. Well, if you don't want a wedding, you can do what you like with that money, Margaret nodded to Oliver. Thank you, Mama. Oliver smiled happily. The money will be very useful to us now. I'm glad to help. You're all grown up and practical. Other people would be happy to spend money on a holiday, but you're thinking about the future. I have to. Oliver sighed. Her son left and Margaret stayed at home with a troubled heart. She was worried about Oliver. He hadn't finished his studies. He didn't have a proper job. He didn't have a place to live. Now he was getting married. If the children came, Oliver would have to work at unskilled labor from morning till night to provide for his family. This was not the future Margaret had dreamed of for her only child. He's a grown man. He'll sort it out, her sister Vanessa reassured her over the phone that evening. What are you worried about? You've done everything you had to do. It's up to him now. Shouldn't we give him money for a flat? Margaret consulted Vanessa. It'd be easier on the young people. At least they wouldn't have to pay rent. Let him pay, objected her elder sister. Don't even think of mentioning that money now. They'll sit on their necks and shrink from it. But they will try to get out of the situation. Maybe they'll succeed. And you can always give them the flat as a present. It's not time yet. You're right, Vanessa, you're right, Margaret agreed. Of course, said her sister, grinning. Come and visit me. Come tomorrow, we'll go to a film, sit in a cafe. You need to unwind. You're right again, Margaret smiled. I'm so lucky to have a sister like that, someone close to me who's always there to cheer me up. Oliver and Julia were married. The wedding took place in the city registry office in a modest and quiet manner. Margaret, Vanessa, and Ellie and Julia's two girlfriends attended the ceremony. Afterwards, a small group of people had a modest celebration in a cafe. They sat for a short time, made a few toasts to the newlyweds, presented them with gifts, and left. Julia had to go to her shift, and Oliver was waiting for her at work. What a wedding, Margaret said disappointedly when she and her sister were alone. The women decided to do a little shopping. Oh, come on, Vanessa said nonchalantly. Young people don't care about anything these days, as long as they lived well. Did Oliver and Julia have a good life? Margaret had no idea. Her son tried not to talk to his mother about it, and she didn't feel comfortable asking, prying into a grown man's soul. The young people came to visit occasionally. Julia behaved politely, but coldly and aloofly. Margaret noted that there seemed to be a good relationship between the young couple. Oliver's work was not going well. He changed places and employers, looking for a decent income, but nothing worked. Oliver didn't want to think about going back to university. Margaret was tempted several times to tell her son that she had a financial safety cushion, which she was ready to give him. She wanted to support Oliver, to take the despair out of his eyes. But the woman held back. We need to let the young ones try to get back on their feet on their own. It's important. It's not like they're so needy right now. Yes, it's hard, but they're two adults who should be able to cope. But if there's a baby, then it's a different matter. Children should live in normal conditions, with calm, peaceful parents. It's been a few years. The situation in the son's family did not change. He was still looking for a job. Oliver went from being a jolly joker Balaguer to a scowling man. Margaret thought it was because of money problems. But one day she happened to witness a conversation between her son and Julia. The couple had come to visit Margaret. It had been happening less and less lately. The woman went into the kitchen to take a goose roasted with apples out of the oven. When she returned with the tray in her hands, she witnessed an ugly scene. You're nothing but a worthless man. Julia looked at Oliver with dislike. You can't do anything. Rachel married Andrew. He got her a cool phone for her birthday, and they're going on holiday to the Emirates soon. And you can't even afford a spa day for the woman you love. What about a spa? We're about to be evicted from our flat for non-payment. Oliver lowered his head in silence. He had nothing to say. The young man must have felt really worthless at that moment. Margaret's heart clenched with pity for her son. Wow. Did Julia often humiliate him in this way if she couldn't help it when she visited him? And Oliver hung his head too habitually. He was not even surprised, nor did he try to defend himself. And Julia, it turned out, was a real piece of work. She pretended to be modest at first. It cost Margaret a great deal of labor to pull herself together. One must not show one's true attitude to the situation. In fact, she must pretend that she had neither seen nor heard anything. Her interference would only spoil everything. Julia will have the opportunity to call Oliver a mama's boy, and she'd have a hard time with her mother-in-law, that's for sure. No, let them sort it out themselves, they're adults. For the rest of the evening, until the young people left, Margaret kept neutral, talking on distracted subjects, smiling at both spouses, and trying not to notice the fixed sadness in her son's eyes. When the children left, it was obvious to Margaret. Oliver is madly in love with Julia. And it is immediately clear he is ready to turn mountains for her sake. He tries, he fights, but he fails. Largely because Oliver never finished school. And he didn't finish his studies because of Julia. He had to work hard to satisfy the demands of his beloved. Margaret twitched herself. She had to be objective. After all, it had been Oliver's choice to drop out of university and get a job. Yes, in many ways it had come out of a desire to please Julia. But it was Oliver's own decision. How can I help my son now? Margaret thought again about the money in the account. Maybe we should give it to Oliver. Let him buy a flat. It would make Julia feel better. Margaret was accustomed to consult her sister Vanessa on serious matters, so she rang her sister. "You're mad," Vanessa exclaimed when she heard her sister's reasoning. "Don't buy Oliver a flat now. Don't you realize that it would be considered marital property? They've only been together a little over a year. What if there's a divorce? Julia would take half of it without blinking an eye. I understand if they had kids. Then at least the grandkids would get everything. But as it is, there's no telling who's going to get it." Margaret realized her sister was right again. There's so much to consider, it's hard to keep in one's head. It's not easy being a mother to a grown-up son, Margaret sighed. It's not easy being a mother at all, but sometimes it's nice, her sister countered. A few more years passed. Margaret could see that her son was unhappily married. Oliver was still looking for a decent living. He did everything he could. He worked as a shift worker, tried to start a business, and worked as a trucker, but he didn't stay anywhere for long. Then the company went bankrupt. Then the next medical examination did not pass. Finally, Oliver gave up, tired of being disappointed. One day he arrived at his mother's house suddenly, unannounced, alone. "We can't afford to live in Seattle," he sighed. "It's too expensive for us. We're going back to Claremont. We'll live with you for a while. Do you mind?" Margaret shook her head in surprise. "Good," Oliver nodded. "In that case, we'll come back next week." Margaret was at a loss for words after her son's departure. Are they going to live together here in the village? What kind of a strange decision is that? There's not even much work here. What do Oliver and Julia expect? But Margaret did not argue with her son. She could see he was having a hard enough time as it was. All right, let them try. They're probably just looking for a way out of a difficult situation. They're considering a life in the country. Well, we can do that. The city didn't work out. Life together with Oliver and Julia began with a turf war. "Mom, we're going to live in the living room," said Oliver. "Why?" Margaret was surprised. She had prepared a corner bedroom for the young couple. She thought it was the coziest and most remote room, and would be more comfortable for the young people. "Because it's the biggest and brightest room," Oliver replied simply. Margaret realized later that her son was broadcasting Julia's will. He was always trying to please his wife. He loved his young wife more than his life. And she took advantage of that. Julia immediately showed her true face to her mother-in-law, not even trying to pretend to be polite or modest. She didn't like everything Margaret did. Her mother-in-law didn't cook properly, too fatty, unhealthy food. She didn't know how to set a table. And she didn't even scrub the floors properly. Julia often made contemptuous remarks to Margaret. "Why do you rattle your dishes in the morning and disturb your sleep? Or do your friends laugh too loudly? And anyway, can't you get together somewhere else in the evening now?" At first, Margaret was at a loss for words at her sister-in-law's insolence. But then, of course, she thought of appropriate responses to Julia's barbs. She wanted to remind the young woman that she was not in her own house, and that she should behave more modestly. But Margaret refrained for her son's sake. She saw how much he was attached to Julia, loved and worshipped her. The young husband tried to fulfill every whim of his wife. There were many whims. Oliver did not cope and felt guilty. Julia fueled this guilt in him. She often mentioned the husbands and boyfriends of her acquaintances, who lavished jewelry on their loved ones and literally showered them with money. Margaret understood the purpose of all this talk. Julia manipulated Oliver, played on his feelings, used her spouse, suppressed. But she wasn't even trying to open her son's eyes. He wasn't in the right state of mind now anyway, too blinded by love and passion. Margaret sincerely did not understand what her son found in this Julia. Well, yes, she was pretty, but there's a lot of them out there, and yet such strong feelings. It seemed that if Julia asked him to jump off a cliff, he'd do it gladly. Oliver got a job at the local sawmill. It was hard work, physically exhausting, but the pay was good. Enough to periodically take Julia to the city, then to shopping, then to a restaurant. The young wife herself did not bother to work. Well, where can I find a suitable place here in the village? She sighed. And in the city every day, Margaret, go to the city. All of them. I used to go, Margaret suddenly remembered. I had no husband, and I had a baby to raise. I had to get from here to the Central Market every day. Why are you comparing different times and situations? Julia sighed languidly. Firstly, I'm married. Fortunately, the responsibility for the financial maintenance of the family lies with the man, not the woman. Secondly, we are not in a hurry to have children. I believe that to give birth without a home, without a yard, terribly irresponsible. And thirdly, I'm going through such a period now. Do you think it's easy to work as a waitress on night shifts, to go out, to put up with the antics of customers? I need to recuperate, get my head round it. Margaret had a lot to say to her daughter-in-law, but she kept quiet for her son's sake. He was having a hard enough time as it was, and now he would be flitting between mother and wife, like between two fires. Margaret realized that her daughter-in-law was openly condemning her life. Julia thought it was irresponsible to have children without a home, without a yard. It's a reproach to her, isn't it? When she and Andrew had Oliver, the young family had no home of their own. That's what her daughter-in-law was implying. The longer the young people lived at Margaret's, the clearer the woman realized that Julia was manipulating Oliver, making him dance to her tune. She uses her spouse, her son, the one who is in love with the young beauty, to the point of losing his mind. The wife turns the situation in her favor. Julia herself clearly does not have any tender feelings for her husband. This is evident from her irritation, from the unpleasant looks at the spouse, from the words, gestures. There's a lot of signs of that, and how only the son does not notice. So why is Julia still with Oliver? The answer is simple: who else would go to such lengths for her? Where else would she find someone so loyal and obedient? A feeling like Oliver's for Julia is rare, and the girl realizes that. She will try to squeeze the maximum out of the situation, and if there is a better option, she will easily leave Oliver. Being confident in her own attractiveness, Julia behaved rudely with her mother-in-law right in front of Oliver. She must have realized that Margaret could see right through her. It made her angry, annoyed, and frightened, apparently. And how did Julia look at her mother-in-law? She felt superfluous in her own home: the arrogant, contemptuous glance, the barbed remarks, the reproaches. In order to have less contact with her sister-in-law, Margaret herself now went to visit neighbors, and also often went to her sister Vanessa and even stayed overnight at her place. Vanessa, of course, advised her to put Julia in her place. "This is your house," her sister shook her head. Remind her of that. Make her think about it. Tell her to separate, to look for a place to live, because she's living on her own and she's being insolent. Well, do you want me to talk to her myself if you're uncomfortable? No, Margaret waved her hands. No way. Oliver is always on her side in everything. He was already having a hard enough time as it was, and he didn't want to add to it. Oliver really believed everything his wife said. Margaret tried to behave as politely as possible, kept silent in response to her daughter-in-law's barbed remarks, cleaned her plates without complaint, and put up with her reproaches. But Julia, apparently, still complained to her husband about his mother, put it in an unpleasant light. "Mum, why are you picking on her?" Sometimes the son would start a conversation. Julia is a wonderful woman. I love her. You mustn't think of her as an enemy. Try to make it up to her. I never quarreled with her. Margaret tried to justify herself. I try not to talk to her at all. She turns every conversation to her own side. She makes me her #1 enemy. That's what it's all about. It's sad. Oliver shook his head. That's what Julia says. You either blame her, ignore her, or make her work in the kitchen. You can't have it both ways. Why do you make her clean up after herself? Julia's been going through a rough patch. She needs a break. I was just reminding her to put her plate away. No one's making her work. I'm serving you. Oliver looked at her mother with a sad look, and Margaret realized it was useless. He wouldn't believe that his wonderful Julia was systematically turning her husband and mother-in-law's life into a nightmare. Maybe it will come to Oliver at some point, but certainly not now. Julia masterfully pitted Oliver against his own mother, the person who sheltered the couple in her home, gave them shelter, who essentially feeds them. Oliver earned a pittance at the sawmill, and the lion's share of his salary went to pay off his loans. In the city, the couple had accumulated loans, for which they now had to pay. It was hurtful and painful. Margaret saw no way out of the situation. She could only hope that sooner or later Oliver would see the light. Sometimes she wanted to throw the insolent youth out of the house, but that would mean losing her son forever. Julia had a way of turning Oliver against his mother over nothing. And if she threw them out of the house at a difficult moment, there'd be drama to be played out. Shakespeare would be jealous, and the house, to be fair, it was Oliver's. When Margaret's mother died, she suddenly realized that these things usually happen suddenly. Yes, Mum had been ill, in need of help, but there was nothing to suggest that she'd passed away suddenly. Margaret thought about it a lot. After all, she might one day be gone just as suddenly. And then what would happen to Oliver? The inheritance, waiting 6 months. What if there's another bidder for the house? Unexpected heirs. My father had a complicated relationship with his relatives. Anything's possible. To protect Oliver, Margaret, who was the only owner of the house at the time, wrote a gift deed to her son. And that was it. Her soul was at rest. Margaret was used to living for her only child. She did everything for him. The house was now officially Oliver's, and his son knew it. The truth was, Oliver didn't think he'd need the inheritance. He planned to settle down in the city, buy a nice flat. What was he going to do with a country house? Who knew it would turn out like this? Margaret decided to be patient. It cost her a lot of effort to hold on and not to take it out on Julia. And it was not a healthy life for her. But for the sake of her son, she could bear it. As long as Oliver was happy. If it hadn't been for Vanessa and her sensible advice, Margaret would have spent all her savings on a flat in the city for young people. But her sister had been right. The woman realized that now more than ever. Julia doesn't love Oliver. That much is obvious. She's using him. And if Oliver buys a flat that would be considered jointly acquired property, the young wife will immediately demand a divorce. She'll legally take half of it with her into her new life. And that's a lot of good money. No, she won't, Julia. Oliver can't go on blinded by this strange love forever. He'll see the light one day. That's when he'll need a flat in the city for his new life. It's just a pity Oliver can't be kicked out of the house. Margaret had to endure the antics and unjust reproaches of her daughter-in-law. There was no end to it. But the woman realized that now she was unable to change anything. Vanessa, seeing her sister's distress, suggested that they go on holiday together. Why, to get away? She urged Margaret over the phone. We'll sunbathe on the sea, we'll swim, we'll go on excursions. It'll be great, agree. Margaret eventually gave in. She really needed a break from everything that was going on at home. Let the young people live in the village house by themselves. Julia would have to cook and clean. They're so spoiled they won't even wash a plate. She sits at home all day watching soap operas on her phone. Julia, of course, expressed her displeasure about Margaret's holiday. There's no money in the family. And some people go to resorts, she replied to Oliver's remark that his salary had been cut again. But then even the man who had angelic patience and was in love with his wife couldn't stand it. Julia, what do you care? Mum earned it. She's entitled to it. Yes, and what about my holiday? We've never been anywhere with you before. And we'll earn it, I promise. Margaret disappeared into her room without saying anything. She had no time to get into an argument with her sister-in-law. Things wouldn't pack themselves. It had been a marvelous trip. Margaret and Vanessa rented a cottage in a small village on the Black Sea. The sisters walked a lot, swam in the warm waves, sunbathed, went on a variety of excursions. Margaret once took a risk and realized an old dream, took a ride on a jet ski with a young and reckless driver. Splashing in the face, dizzying speed, endless sea surface. Margaret had never had so much fun and fear at the same time. What about the sea, excursions? The sisters even went to discos at night and danced like in their youth. Don't despair. Thank you, Vanessa, for pulling me out. Margaret was genuinely pleased. It felt like 10 years younger. By the way, that's exactly what it looks like, Vanessa smiled. You look better, more rested. You look wonderful. And so it was. For the first time in years, Margaret liked herself. She looked fresher in the mirror, and most importantly, there was a sparkle in her eyes and life and energy in her face. Margaret felt that she had left behind all her problems, her capricious, demanding daughter-in-law, her unsettled son, her endless quarrels in the kitchen. There was a powerful reset. The woman felt strong, beautiful, and energetic. The world seemed bright and friendly. Only good things were thought of. One day the sisters stayed up late, admiring unusually large stars and bright yellow moon, which left a clear path on the sea surface. It was beautiful, Margaret said. It sure is. Vanessa agreed. It's a pity we have to go back tomorrow. I can't believe it. I like it so much here, another life, another world. And there it's all the same again. They're chasing them away. Vanessa couldn't take it anymore. They're sitting on your neck and being rude. When she waits for me, I'll come to you and put things in order. Don't. Margaret protested. It would make things worse. It won't make things worse, Vanessa grumbled. It can't get any worse than this. Good evening, fair ladies. A low, pleasant voice came from somewhere behind them. Both women flinched in surprise and turned round. In front of them stood a man, slim, trim, with elegant gray hair on his temples. He smiled charmingly and very friendly. He was wearing jeans rolled up to his knees and a loose black t-shirt. In all this, the stranger looked very stylish and attractive. Hello to you, too, Vanessa answered for the two of them. It's a lovely evening, isn't it? The man kept coming closer and closer. Margaret couldn't take her eyes off his smile. It made the stranger's face glow from within. The man introduced himself as Harry, said he had just arrived here today and checked into a room on the first floor of the cafe. The sisters were just there tonight having dinner at the place, drinking wine, eating kebab, enjoying live music. Harry immediately noticed two beautiful single ladies at the table and purposely followed them to the shore. I'm sorry if I startled you, he said. And don't think I'm a frivolous adventurer. It's just that you both have such kind smiles. I wanted to get to know you better. I'm here all by myself. I'd like to find some company for walking and socializing if you don't mind. There's a problem with that, Vanessa shrugged her shoulders guiltily. We're leaving tomorrow at lunchtime, the plane. That's a shame. The smile slipped off Harry's face for a moment. Margaret, too, was sorry that they wouldn't get to know the man better. Surely it would have been even more fun and interesting for the three of them to spend the holiday together. There was something about Harry, something special. Margaret wanted to be near him, to look into his eyes, to admire the man's smile, to listen to him. Strange. The woman didn't remember anything like that happening to her in the last 30 years. And had it ever happened in her life at all? Well, if that's the case, we have one night left, Harry smiled again. Let's make it fun, something to remember. I come here a lot. I'll show you such places. I'll show you places like this. Are you coming with me? Margaret was ready to say yes immediately. But Vanessa, cautious Vanessa, unlike her sister, did not lose her head around the charming stranger. We're kind of seeing you for the first time, she said with an embarrassed smile. I do not want to offend you, but still. Harry slapped himself on the forehead. Of course, of course. There are all sorts of freaks and criminals out there now. Of course you're afraid I'm like that, aren't you? Let's just walk along the seafront then. There are lots of people here. I don't want to leave you. We can do that, Vanessa said cheerfully. Margaret could see that her sister was glad that Harry wasn't offended. It was a wonderful walk. The sisters and their new acquaintance chatted and laughed non-stop. It turned out that Harry lives in New York. He has his own business there, a chain of shops in California. He is often there on business, meeting with winemakers, signing contracts, making purchases, in general, developing the business. Harry also told about his personal life simply, without secrecy. He acted as if he had known Vanessa and Margaret for 100 years. I was widowed early, he said. My daughter was only 9 at the time. I never remarried because my daughter didn't want a stepmother in the house. And the word of an only child has always been law to Harry. You and Margaret are alike in that, Vanessa said. She lives only with her son too, and she puts up with a lot for his sake, allows him everything. Yes, Harry looked at Margaret with interest and met her eyes. The woman's eyes flashed like they had when she was young. She even felt hot. That's a waste, Harry continued. Years later, I realized it wasn't right. My daughter grew up to be a spoilt brat, but she's doing well now. She's found a husband who tolerates her whims as well as I do, and they live peacefully. Abroad, unfortunately. They've gone to a warm place. So I'm all alone. I have a job, friends. But still, after my daughter's departure, the house and my soul feel empty. The Trinity partied till the morning. It felt like they were back in their youth. Harry was clearly sympathetic to Margaret. He tried to make her like him. From time to time he took her hand as if by accident. And once he gave her a gentle, brief hug around the waist. But Margaret wanted that moment to last forever. The sisters didn't get to their cottage until it was starting to get light. Harry, of course, volunteered to escort them. I hate to leave you, he said, looking at Margaret. Margaret, do you two want to exchange phone numbers? Vanessa suggested. What if we had such a good time? Maybe we could come back again next year. We should call each other so we can have a holiday together. That'd be great. That's a great idea, Harry said, dictating his number. No. Give me your phone number, Harry suggested. Margaret complied with his request with a smile. He deliberately held her hand in his as he took her mobile phone. There was so much warmth from him, so much tenderness. Margaret wanted to dissolve into it all. It was a shame they had met so late. Harry quickly dialed Margaret's number from his phone. There he smiled. Now that we've exchanged numbers, we won't lose each other. That's great. Margaret nodded. She realized that this phone exchange meant nothing, and the fairy tale that had almost begun would never really begin, because there was no tomorrow. Tonight she and Vanessa would fly home, and there would be a cramped village house, a disgruntled daughter-in-law, a disengaged son. And the problems hadn't gone anywhere while she'd been away. Harry, Margaret thought. Well, Harry, today he walked with us. Tomorrow he'll find someone else. Such a man, he's not for me. He's too handsome, too successful, too wonderful. I can't have a man like that. It's sad, of course, but it's the truth of life. And how did he look at you? Vanessa smiled when the sisters were alone. I wish someone would look at me with admiration someday, just once. Come on, Margaret said with a smile. She knew she would think of Harry often now, his soft voice, his delightful manners, his beautiful eyes. And let that man forget about her the very next day. It would make no difference. Margaret did not reach her home until evening. She and Vanessa had had a couple of hours' nap before the flight. But still Margaret felt tired and broken after the sleepless night, the flight, and the acclimatization. The gate was unlocked. Oliver must have forgotten to lock the gate when he got home from work. Oh, he's been tired lately, Margaret thought. And then Julia doesn't know what she's been feeding her husband while I've been away. It was hard to imagine Julia cooking borscht for her husband. The windows of the house were wide open. From inside, the television was blaring the evening news. Margaret was about to enter the house with a smile when she heard Julia's voice. She was obviously in the kitchen. How? She was reprimanding someone, obviously Oliver. Very simple. She'll be here in a minute. So what? We won't send her to Maggie's for milk. And while she's walking around, we'll put her stuff outside. It's a piece of cake. It's been agreed 100 times, Julia argued. What are you worried about? Isn't that too harsh? Oliver asked in an uncertain voice. She's my mother after all, and this is her house. It's not hers. It's yours, Julia argued. You showed me the deed of gift. If that's the case, why should I put up with her here? I mean, she's been bugging me about this and that. Oliver, I told you she's trying to break us up. But then I'll leave. Because I can't live in a house with my mother. Okay, Oliver mumbled conciliatorily. We'll proceed as we agreed. Just don't let it get to you. We're doing the right thing, you know, standing up for our personal boundaries. We're doing good. Margaret stood under the window, dead or alive. The meaning of the conversation she'd just overheard slowly dawned on her. They were going to kick her out of the house, and Oliver had agreed to that. This was something the older woman had never expected. Her eyes flickered darkly. Her blood pressure must have spiked. Margaret took a few deep breaths to get herself under control, let the joyful look pass, and entered the native hay. Oh, hello, said Julia, smiling lusciously. And we were expecting you a little later. I was in a taxi, Margaret replied. I didn't have time to look round, and that's why. Julia, I've brought you some presents, she continued. Oh, what a lot of impressions. I'll share them. I'll tell you about them. Julia pretended to be happy to see him. Oliver stood by her side, slumped and silent. Margaret understood the reason for her son's sadness. Of course he was having a hard time, but he could not put his wife in her place. She has too much influence over him. Oh, Margaret, said Julia, will you go to Maggie's and get some fresh milk, please? I've got soup boiling on the cooker. I can't get away. Oliver's very tired from work and he's ill. If you're not too tired, of course. Margaret nodded and left the house, already knowing what awaited her on her return. It was good that she had listened to this conversation. At least she would have time to prepare for a serious conversation with her son and his wife. Margaret noticed her suitcases on the porch from a distance. They stood orphaned, leaning against the wall, waiting for their hostess. The hope that Oliver would stop the brazen wife had vanished like smoke. The woman went up to the porch and knocked on the door. There's a note. Julia's voice came from inside. Read it, and you'll understand. Goodbye. I don't want your note, said Margaret. I want to talk to you, to look you in the eye. Oh, eyes. The door swung open with a clatter. Julia stood on the threshold. She looked haughtily at Margaret. Well, will you look, if that's what you want? Julia, why have you done this to me? Margaret asked. I've tried to be your friend, hadn't I? You're annoying me, the young woman shared. You look judgmental. Everything is wrong. Everything is wrong for you. You make your own rules. I don't feel like I own the place, and Oliver's being nice to you. But this is my house. Margaret reminded me gently. So it's only natural that I should have my own ways. There you go again, Julia exclaimed. Are you insinuating that we live here again? It's not your house, by the way. It's not yours, it's your son's. So you're the one living here. Then get out of here. Your pension is good. Enough for a rented place. Thank you for packing my things, Margaret said calmly. And it took a lot of effort for Margaret to keep calm. She would indeed cry bitterly when she got to Vanessa. Of course she would go to her sister. Who else would she go to? Except she doesn't have much stuff. My things are just clothes, Margaret sighed heavily. Where are the photo albums, the old books, the letters? And this rubbish? Julia grinned. We threw it away. How? Margaret gasped. She felt as if she'd been punched in the solar plexus. It was my family history. Old photographs, letters from Andrew and my parents, postcards, diaries Vanessa and I kept when we were young. Ellie and Oliver's first drawings. All of it carefully stored in boxes and folders, neatly arranged on the shelves of a rack in my bedroom. Was there nothing left? Julia looked at her mother-in-law defiantly. What's with the habit of clinging to rubbish? Grinned the insolent girl. What's the use of these dusty papers? It's even easier to breathe without them. Margaret, in spite of her condition, suddenly had a marvelous idea. The woman even had to suppress a smile so as not to accidentally give herself away. Julia. She would soon stop feeling like the mistress of the situation. In a couple of minutes, the smug expression will evaporate from her pretty face, Margaret thought. "So you've thrown everything out of my room?" she asked. "Absolutely," Julia replied. "It's going to be our dressing room now. All the boxes, every single one of them. Have you even looked inside? Some we looked at, some we threw away." "Why?" Julia was suddenly tense. Were there documents or what? "Dots can be recovered in a pinch," Margaret said, sinking tiredly onto the porch steps. "Was the blue shoebox thrown away too?" "Yeah, I guess so. What's the big deal?" Because Margaret looked up at Julia, it was my savings, the money for the flat I was going to give Oliver. The words had an incredible effect. Julia was stunned, pale. She opened and closed her mouth a couple of times, trying to say something. Then she sank helplessly to the steps beside Margaret. "Why didn't you tell me?" she almost whispered. Margaret was pleased with the effect of the phrase. She did not keep any money in any blue shoebox. It was just sitting there in the account, slowly building up. But Julia needed to be taught a lesson for all the bad things she'd done to her and Oliver. "How did I know you'd decide to throw my things out of the house?" Margaret said, stubbornly playing the part of a confused, bewildered old woman. "I never imagined such a thing." Julia shook her head as if she had woken from a dream. Her eyes lit up with eagerness for action. "You will tell me everything in detail," she asked. "What did the box look like? What shade of blue was it? Was it large or small?" Margaret answered, trying not to confuse her statements, lest the situation get out of hand. Oliver had stayed home the whole time. Didn't even stick his nose out on the porch. He was probably ashamed that he'd gone along with his wife and kicked his mother out of the house. But he couldn't turn against his wife either. He loved her too much, which Julia took advantage of. Having answered all Julia's questions, Margaret headed for the bus stop. "Come on," Stay, her daughter-in-law said. She needed her mother-in-law now to help her in her search. The young woman was determined to find the box, even in a landfill, even at the end of the world, and Margaret could help her. She knew what the receptacle of a large sum of money looked like. Why should she? Margaret was a little surprised. How so? Why should we look for the box of money together? You do care about your savings, don't you? That's what it is. Margaret smiled. That's where you're wrong. I don't care what happens to that money. I was going to give it to you anyway. If you find it, take it. Margaret walked down her home street and felt Julia's eyes on her. Her sister-in-law was shocked that she had thrown away so much money with her own hands. Yes, but now Julia would dig her nose into the ground to bring that wealth home. Greedy Julia doesn't realize Margaret's money is in a bank account. Her mother-in-law is not so inexperienced as to keep such funds in a box. Before heading to the bus stop, Margaret stopped by to see Jen, a neighbor. She had once been friends with her mother Maggie, a firm friendship, but now Maggie was sadly no longer alive. Margaret still had a good relationship with Jen, though. She needed someone in the village, someone to tell her what was going on, to keep an eye on Julia. And Jen was the perfect person to be that informant. The woman had been exasperated at first, listening to Margaret's story. She couldn't understand how it was possible to do that to a man who let his daughter-in-law and son into the house when they were in a difficult situation. And then, having learnt the full story, Jen laughed loudly and merrily. Oh, Aunt Margaret, you've got to be kidding. You should have rubbed her nose in it like that. You've got that right, haven't you? I'd like to know how they're doing, Margaret smiled. How are they living? How's the search going? Something tells me this story will open Oliver's eyes to his wife. That's too bad, Jen shook her head. I didn't think he'd be so weak-willed. Love is evil, Margaret sighed. Jen had hit a sore spot in her heart. Of course, I've been looking after them, and I've kept my son involved. Do you know how quick he is? Peckinpah. Jen's son had just turned 14. He's been using his phone to film content for his channel. And once again, he's got a few things to go on. When Margaret was done with her chores, she went to see her sister Vanessa. She would not abandon her, would listen to her, support her, pity her. It was good to have such a person. A fortnight had passed since the evening of Margaret's return from the resort. It was a short time, but a lot had happened in that time. Firstly, Margaret's plan had worked. Julia was hooked. She found out where the rubbish from their village was taken, found the dump, and now she traveled there every day as if it were her job. Thankfully, the girl didn't work anywhere and had plenty of free time. Julia's trips to the dump were regularly reported to Margaret by phone by Jen. She proved to be an excellent liaison. Oh, Aunt Margaret. What a circus. She goes to the bus stop first thing in the morning like a bayonet. She's like a tourist. She's got a huge rucksack on her shoulders, overalls, gloves, bags. Everything is serious. And in the evening she comes back tired, upset, angry. She smells like a motherfucker. Animals scatter. People cringe. What a circus. The stories of Julia's hikes were not the only ones. Pekin, Jen's son, sometimes followed Julia, traveling with the boys to the dumps and filming videos of the young woman's persistent digging through mountains of rubbish. Margaret watched these videos on Pekin's channel. Julia scrupulously, day after day, combed through the dump, not missing a single square meter. It looked comical, of course. But Margaret was already feeling a little sorry for her sister-in-law, almost ex-sister-in-law. Oliver had filed for divorce. First, Margaret had heard from the neighbors that Oliver had left home. Then the son called his mother, apologized, repented, and told her he was divorcing Julia. She had turned me away with her obsession with money, her boorishness, her greed. We're splitting up, Mum. I can't go on with her. She must be crazy. Julia can stay at our house for a while. I've given her a week because she has nowhere to go. Julia keeps hoping to find money. It's become an obsession for her. She blames herself for not looking in the boxes you threw out, and she's eating herself up. She blames me too. It's unbearable. What about you? What are you going to do in town? I found a job, a good job at last, with accommodation, which is important. I'll have to go on business trips, but what's in it for me? But the money's good. Margaret felt better after talking to her son. It was so important to be in touch with the person she loved. There was no more conflict or misunderstanding between her and Oliver. Oliver's life seemed to be getting better. He's found a job, he's getting away from Julia, who was openly using him. Maybe he'll meet a nice girl soon and be happy in his personal life again. What are his years? The relationship with Julia is clearly a lesson to Oliver. He won't fall into that kind of net again. At least Margaret hoped so. The nicest thing that had happened in Margaret's life was the day after she'd arrived at her sister's house. Vanessa, of course, had taken her in. They had a spare room in their flat. "Live as long as you like, sis," she hugged Margaret. "I'd be glad if you moved in for good." Margaret went to bed upset. She had no idea how she was going to live her life. In the morning, she received a phone call from Harry, the same casual acquaintance who had charmed the woman at the resort. He said he couldn't forget their meeting, that he thought of Margaret all the time, dreamed of seeing her again. It was incredible. Harry. Margaret had never thought that such a man would actually fall in love with her, but it seemed that he had. Harry called and wrote often. They chatted a lot, and gradually, somehow, they became closer to each other. At a distance, yes, but still Margaret felt that they both needed this companionship. Harry expressed a desire to come to Margaret, but she suggested another option, a more pleasant one. Margaret would fly to him herself, because, well, the atmosphere of a resort and a dusty old country town were, as they say, two big differences. The money Margaret had for the trip was the very money she had once saved for her son's flat. Oliver earns his own money, but she, Margaret, has only one life, and she should enjoy every moment of it. The woman realized this in her retirement, but better late than never. In general, Margaret was going on a long journey, went shopping with Vanessa, bought beautiful things, and felt really happy. She had one more unpleasant but urgent thing to do before she left. A conversation with Julia. She's had enough of being a loser, Margaret thought. Let her start a new life too.